At the beginning of the story, a scene unfolds in a crumbling, half-destroyed building. People are seen running frantically, chased by a swarm of zombies. One of them shouts to shut the door, but just as they try to close it, the zombies reach the entrance. Panic spreads as they struggle to figure out how to deal with the overwhelming threat. With no other option left but to fight, they prepare to face the horde. The zombies are countless, towering in size, making the situation even more terrifying. In a desperate move, the team grabs a large pillar and forcefully pushes it toward the zombies. One of their members takes aim through a hole in the pillar and throws a bomb at the incoming horde. A loud explosion follows as the bomb detonates. Breathing heavily, one of them mutters, "Did we get those asshole zombies?" Another team member points ahead and says, "Look at that, it's a safety house." Suddenly, a system notification appears on screen, 2 minutes remaining until the zone closes. A faint glimmer of hope flickered in the distance. A safety house had appeared. For Ishijo Shinya, that meant the end was finally in sight. Clearing was within reach. He introduced himself with a quiet resolve. Ishijo Shinya, someone who had desperately clung to life for the past 5 years in a world twisted by chaos. It all began with the Great Catastrophe, a sudden calamity that shattered humanity's peace in an instant. From that day onward, the world was no longer recognizable. Special zones began emerging randomly across the globe. Each zone came with its own difficulty level, and within them, endless hordes of zombies attacked without mercy. Humans trapped inside had only one path to survival: clear the mission, locate the safety house, and escape. Successful survivors saw their stats increase and gained precious survival items. But failure to reach the safety house within the time limit led to a grim fate: transformation into a zombie. In just 6 months, 80% of humanity had already fallen. The world had turned into a living hell, yet in these brutal zones, survivors didn't remain weak. Constant battle forced them to grow stronger. From that pain, power emerged. Many fierce individuals were born within the chaos, all with one goal: to grow stronger, earn greater rewards, and ultimately achieve the Grand Slam, clearing all 100 levels of the special zones. And today, for the first time in history, a level 100 zone had appeared. Ishijo stood at its threshold, level 100, on the verge of clearing the final zone. Alongside 5 trusted companions, he had come this far. Just a little more and it would be over. If they could reach the safety house, then he, Ishijo Shinya, would become the first Grand Slam achiever. He had survived countless brushes with death to reach this point, just a little more. With determination burning in their eyes, the team rushed toward the safety house. But before they could reach it, a chilling surprise struck them. From the window of the safety house, a monstrous zombie appeared. Ichijo's eyes widened in disbelief. It wasn't just another undead, it was something far more terrifying. As the creature moved closer, Ichijo urgently asked his team if everyone was okay. One member gasped at the realization. There was a gatekeeper guarding the safety house. Ishijo's heart pounded. This enemy was on an entirely different level from anything they had faced before. But it was the final obstacle. Defeating it was the only way to reach the safety house. A heavy aura radiated from the gatekeeper. His presence alone felt overwhelming. Among the team, one female member quickly assessed their supplies. Only 5 haste potions and 1 power potion remained. That was all they had. She made a bold decision. She would draw the gatekeeper's aggro. The others would use the haste potions to hold it back. Then, with a single use of the power potion, she would strike the final blow. There would be no second chance. Ishijo quickly downed a potion, but as the liquid hit his tongue, the taste felt wrong. He charged forward, engaging the gatekeeper. But something was wrong. His body felt sluggish, his strength slipping away. Realization struck him like a knife. They hadn't given him a power boost. They had given him a weakness potion. As he staggered, betrayed, one of his teammates smirked. Now it was their turn. Without hesitation, the other 5 members each drank superior haste potions. Their eyes burned with greed and intent. With a weakened Ishijo left behind, they sprinted toward the safety room. The timer began ticking. 20 seconds remained. Ishijo continued battling the powerful zombie, his voice trembling with disbelief. He cried out, questioning why he had been given a weakness potion. Was it some kind of mistake? But the truth hit harder than any monster. One of his teammates, now sprinting with the others toward the safety house, shouted back that it was no mistake. They had prepared it specifically for him. Without items, victory would have been impossible. But with clearing already within reach, all they needed was someone to hold the monster back. As long as Ichijo stalled the gatekeeper, they could safely escape. The betrayal cut deep. The teammate even mocked him, saying that if Ichijo died here, their share of the rewards would increase. He thanked Ichijo for being their stepping stone and declared himself the strongest human now. Staggering under the weight of his weakening body, Ichijo cursed under his breath. He couldn't summon any strength. The realization settled in. They had planned to remove him from the beginning. As they vanished into the portal, one of them sneered that he'd tell the world Ichijo had bravely died for his comrades. He looked forward to meeting Ichijo again someday, after he had turned into a zombie, just so he could kill him himself. Betrayed and cornered, Ichijo screamed, calling them out for what they had done. The group disappeared through the portal, entering the safety room. Left behind, Ichijo faced the monster alone. His body had grown too weak. The zombie slashed at him with its enormous nails. Ichijo fell to the ground, pain overwhelming him. Was this how it would end? Dying in vain? He hated it. A cold system notification echoed through his mind. Special domain has ended. Domain release in progress. Ichijo's thoughts grew heavy. He had fought so hard, survived this long, only to end up as a zombie. The transformation had already begun. He could feel it spreading. Was this the end? Should he just give in? He thought of the betrayal, the pain, and the injustice. His soul refused to let go. Even if he became a zombie, he would have his revenge. Ichijo's consciousness drifted into darkness. He awoke, naked, submerged in strange water. Confusion gripped him. Where was he? Had the transformation completed? Was he now a zombie? Or was this fading consciousness part of the change? His fists clenched. If this was his final struggle, he wouldn't let it go to waste. His life had been pathetic. He had been nothing but a loser. But not anymore. Suddenly, his vision shifted. He opened his eyes and found himself on a familiar rooftop. A brutal scene unfolded before him. The bully who used to torment him in high school was now beating another student. He demanded the bodyguard fee, 50,000 yen. The boy being hit trembled and tried to explain he didn't have the money. But the bully showed no mercy. He ordered him to steal it if necessary. If the payment didn't come by the end of the day, the beatings would continue every time. The scene was too real to be a dream. Ichijo recognized the location. It was the same rooftop where he had suffered countless times. Was this just a dying dream? The pain in his body said otherwise. The bully turned his anger towards the frightened boy again, asking him what he planned to do. The boy, trembling in fear, betrayed Ichijo without hesitation. He told the bully Ichijo had part-time money hidden in his bag. The bully sneered. He mocked the boy for betraying a friend so easily. Then, smirking, he turned towards Ichijo and demanded the money. Ichijo's mind raced with confusion, but clarity soon followed. He had returned to a time before the Great Calamity. The rooftop of school, everything was exactly as it used to be. Without flinching, Ichijo stared at the bully and asked him the date. The bully, annoyed, asked who he thought he was talking to and demanded the bag again. But before he could take another step, Ichijo struck. A powerful punch landed squarely on the bully's face, sending him flying backward. Blood trickled from his nose. The entire crowd froze in shock. Ichijo had just punched Mineta, the same bully who once tormented him. Was he serious? He glared at the boy and repeated his demand with quiet fury. He wouldn't ask again. With steady breath and fierce eyes, Ichijo turned toward us and spoke. He had inherited the power from his past life. And now, it looked like he wouldn't die as a loser after all. Mineta Ippi, a third-year high school student, had built a reputation as a notorious bully. His daily routine involved extorting money under the excuse of collecting bodyguard fees. With the Yakuza backing him, even teachers pretended not to see. Ichijo, having lost his parents early, was forced to support himself through part-time jobs. That made him the perfect target. Men barked at him to hurry, claiming he had others to deal with. He demanded the bodyguard fee again despite Ichijo already paying it 2 days ago. But excuses held no weight with Mineta. Any resistance only made things worse. Everyone watched from the sidelines, relieved that Ichijo remained the primary target. Mineta taunted him, shoving for an answer. But something had changed. This time, Ichijo didn't flinch. He responded firmly. Mineta's fury erupted. Shock rippled through the crowd as Ichijo landed a hit. But once silent spectators whispered in disbelief. Ichijo had struck Mineta. Mineta ordered his lackeys to attack, but their advance was met with surprise. Ichijo, hardened by training in a brutal world, fought back. He had survived countless nights in the apocalyptic world, nights where even sleep was a luxury. He returned from the brink of death more times than he could count. The attackers called him cocky, but Ichijo knew better. In his previous life, the worst betrayal had come from those he trusted. In the apocalypse, it wasn't zombies but humans, stripped of ethics and morals, who became the real monsters. He recalled how comrades had pointed guns at each other for scraps. The guys in front of him were no different. They, too, were trash who turned on anyone to save themselves. Now, he had a chance. One he wouldn't let slip. He refused to repeat the mistakes of his past life. Mineta, stunned, watched Ichijo defeat 2 attackers in an instant. This wasn't the weakling he remembered. Doubt clouded his mind. Was it just luck or some technique Ichijo picked up online? That had to be it. Mineta lunged at him, aiming to end it. But Ichijo stopped the attack effortlessly with just his left arm. There was no fear in his eyes, only an overwhelming bloodlust. Mineta felt it fear. The others, shaken, realized the truth. Ichijo had beaten Mineta and his entire gang. The same Ichijo they had bullied for 3 years now stood stronger than ever. Panic spread. If he could do that to Mineta, the rest of them weren't safe either. Ichijo, catching his breath, noticed something strange. His previous life's power hadn't fully returned, and Mineta had passed out before revealing what day it was. Looking around, he saw the others fleeing. He called out, but they tried to escape, mumbling something about class. Ichijo wasn't finished. There was still one more debt to settle. Cornering one of the fleeing students, he advanced. The boy stuttered in fear, backing away. Ishijo's mind returned to the date, April 20th, 2024. Special zones would begin appearing on May 25th. That left about 1 month until the apocalypse began. He assessed his current strength. After testing, he estimated he had retained about 30% of his previous life's power. It wasn't full strength, but it was more than enough to overpower regular people. Next came the matter of survival supplies. That was crucial. A sudden thought struck him. He called out for his inventory. It opened, just as he hoped. He had brought it with him. Though his level had dropped from 50 to 1, it was still functioning. In the early days of the apocalypse, special zones had appeared globally. Society collapsed. Chaos reigned. With no protection left, humanity was swallowed by fear. Survival became the only goal. Conflicts broke out over resources. People, driven by despair, hurt others without hesitation. Because zone appearances followed no pattern, resources couldn't be stored in fixed locations. Eventually, every human acquired a level 1 inventory. Anything could be stored in these inventories, but since time stopped inside, living beings couldn't survive within them. Advanced inventories could hold more, improving one's survival odds. In his previous life, Ishijo had desperately expanded his inventory until it was as large as a basketball court. Though it had now reset to grade 1, it was still enough. For his reborn self, the current goal was clear: expand the inventory and gather enough supplies to survive. To do that, he needed money. A lot of it. With the power and experience from his past life, an early access inventory, and valuable future knowledge, his growth would be rapid. And finally, there were those bastards. Ishijo no longer saw himself as the same person from before. He would get his revenge, no matter what. One of the underlings noted that Mineta had passed out. Hatano, filled with irritation, ordered someone to pour water on him and wake him up so they could continue. Another member reported that Mineta had run into trouble at school and failed to collect the bodyguard fee. As Mineta regained consciousness, he weakly addressed Hatano, but the older delinquent barked at him to stand up properly. Seeing Mineta return empty-handed at such a critical time only added fuel to Hatano's anger. Mineta tried to explain. Every one of his comrades had been defeated by just one guy. Hatano snapped. If Mineta allowed that boy to escape after school, there would be no forgiveness. Orders were given. Mineta, now fully alert, agreed immediately. Hatano instructed them to take their underlings and bring the brat directly to him. The others responded without hesitation. Hatano's rage had reached its peak. Ishijo was going to be beaten to a pulp. Ishijo recognized the name immediately: Hatano Toshiki. A few students chatted nearby, one inviting the other to hang out after school, but he declined due to cram school. Ishijo recalled that Hatano was the one backing Mineta. A former professional baseball player, Hatano had once been a powerful slugger with monstrous swing speed, but his violent nature led him to strike teammates over simple errors. Eventually, after beating a teammate with a bat, he was expelled from professional sports and slipped into the underworld. Just then, a student approached Ishijo, urging him to wait. When asked where he was going, Ishijo replied plainly classes were over, so he was heading home. The student panicked. Mineta's gang was likely waiting at the school gate, and if Ishijo walked out, he would be killed. Outside, students whispered. They noticed Mineta badly beaten and speculated that his gang was out for revenge. Whispers spread. He must have been attacked on the rooftop. The identity of his opponent was revealed. Ishijo, worried, crept in. They feared they'd been spotted and debated escaping back inside the school. Ishijo, unfazed, stated again that he was heading home. The other warned him. Mineta's gang wasn't as soft as Mineta himself. In Ishijo's thoughts, the looming apocalypse remained a priority. With only a month left until zones appeared and massive zombies emerged, there was too much to prepare. The gang made their move. One thug called out to Ishijo, demanding he come over. Another ordered the bystanders to clear off. They threatened Ishijo, either come quietly or face public humiliation. In Ishijo's mind, he acknowledged that handling everything alone wasn't feasible moving forward. But the forces behind Mineta, they could prove useful. A student watched as Ishijo was taken away. Whispers spread again. Of all people, he picked a fight with Mineta. His fate seemed sealed. One heavyset student muttered Ishijo's name, worded clouding his tone. The gang reported back. Ishijo had come along quietly without resistance. But Ishijo's mind was already moving ahead. The moment he punched Mineta, his plan had begun. He mumbled Hatano's name, recognizing that arrogance in a hunter could lead to their own downfall. Hatano noted how unusually calm Ishijo appeared. Mineta mocked him, claiming he was only pretending to be brave. They warned him again, make enemies of them, and there would be no mercy. If Ishijo got on his knees and begged, they might forgive him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be going home. Demands were made. Ishijo had to prepare at least 1,000,000 yen. Someone lunged, ordering him to stay still. They promised to break his leg. The attack came fast, and one of them shouted in triumph, thinking they'd landed a hit, but it didn't connect. Ishijo had blocked it at close range. Shock spread through the group. Everyone had been taken down in seconds. Confusion gripped Mineta. He couldn't understand how Ishijo, had suddenly become so powerful. Hatano observed him closely. No wasted movements, strong defense and offense. This wasn't normal. Was Ishijo truly just a high school student? His speed was incredible. Ishijo noted that their forms were full of openings. Mineta rushed to check on Hatano, who was coughing from the force of the blow. In his thoughts, Hatano admitted this wasn't the strength of any ordinary teenager. Ichijo's eyes were filled with bloodlust. Mineta had provoked someone far more dangerous than expected. Hatano backed off. He announced he was withdrawing from the matter entirely. Whatever happened to Mineta now wasn't his concern. He even offered up the territory to Ichijo. Mineta was stunned, but Ichijo stated he had no interest in Mineta. It was Hatano he cared about. Hatano was confused. Not long after, another man, amused, asked if Hatano had truly been beaten by a high school student. He couldn't believe it. Hatano, frustrated, pressed him was he taking the job or not. That boy wasn't ordinary. The man responded confidently. Killing the kid wouldn't be a problem, but he'd be taking a third of Hatano's territory's earnings. That was the price. Hatano protested. One brat wasn't worth a third. But the man reminded him he was the one asking for help. Besides, with the upcoming tournament, money was tight. If news of the incident spread, Hatano's entire hold over his territory could collapse. Hatano hesitated. The man's words echoed in his head. Something about Ichijo felt off. Was he being guided by someone else? He remembered Ichijo's words. I'll move you up. It unsettled him. Regardless, Ichijo couldn't be allowed to live. Hatano agreed. The execution would take place tonight. The man thanked him for the business. There was still time, so he told Hatano to relax. But Hatano wasn't at ease. There were more troublesome matters building up that needed attention. At that moment, security at a private lounge shouted, demanding someone leave. Hatano turned, irritated, but his eyes widened. Someone had barged in, a fearless figure. Ichijo had arrived. He declared he was looking for someone. Hatano panicked. How did Ichijo even know about this place? Another man noticed Hatano's pale face and asked what was wrong. Hatano could barely get the words out. This was the same high school student. Ichijo then stated that he had come on Big Brother's orders. After clashing with Mineta and his gang earlier that day, Ichijo realized one thing: his current body was still far too weak. If he wanted revenge, he needed to build it up more. Physical transformation wouldn't happen overnight, but for now there was something more pressing. Stepping into the private lounge, Ichijo confidently declared that he had come under Hatano's orders. One of the men inside sneered, unimpressed by a student calling themselves an underling. To him, Ichijo's intrusion only proved ignorance of the organization's rules. The tension rose quickly. Another man voiced his dislike. Hatano stammered, trying to explain, but Ichijo pressed on. He announced that under Hatano's orders, he had already taken care of everyone outside. The only ones left were here. The shock hit Hatano instantly. Surveillance footage was requested, and when the staff brought it up, the screen confirmed it. Everyone had indeed been taken down. The disbelief spread. No one could accept that a single student had done all this. One of the men accused Ichijo of drugging them. Unable to comprehend what he just witnessed, Hatano's thoughts raced. Could Ichijo's words earlier about moving him up actually be serious? Panic crept in. He had gotten caught in something much bigger than he anticipated. Another man, observing Ichijo's quick reactions, noted that this wasn't normal behavior for a student. The order was given, capture him now. Ichijo's readiness was now clear. One of the men suspected something deeper. Was Ichijo sent here to take him down? He reminded everyone that in the organization, family couldn't be harmed. But if someone broke that rule first, retaliation was fair game. He warned not to take it personally. Hatano tried to defend himself. He claimed that Ichijo was the one who asked him to crush them. He had no idea why Ichijo was there now, but it didn't matter. The man had made up his mind killing Hatano would give him control over everything Hatano owned. The rules were broken and the power grab had begun. Hatano cursed the situation. He wasn't planning to die here. He knew nothing he said would matter now. Escape was the only option. But even then, what was Ichijo truly scheming? As the chaos erupted, Ichijo fought swiftly. One by one, men were taken down with clean, efficient movements. There wasn't a single wasted step. One of the onlookers watched in stunned silence. Ichijo had already eliminated almost everyone. At this rate, even he would fall. The urgency became desperate. Ichijo had to be killed here. No other choice remained. The leader shouted Hatano's name, demanding to know what he was doing just standing there. Hatano stepped in, saying he couldn't overlook the use of a gun against a kid. The man barked back, accusing Hatano of being beaten by Ichijo and now interfering again. Hatano didn't deny it. He admitted that even if Ichijo died, it wouldn't save him. In fact, keeping Ichijo alive might actually work in his favor. The leader snapped. If Hatano was going to side with Ichijo, he'd be killed first. Hatano's mind raced again. He questioned whether Ichijo was really just a high school student. Because of Ichijo, his path to escape had been completely blocked. Even if he managed to survive today, the organization would never forgive him. He cursed his own situation, outmaneuvered by a teenager. Yet in that moment, he also realized Ichijo was now his only remaining lifeline. The leader roared in frustration. Two people, just two, had picked a fight with him, and now his territory was at risk. Tashiki stood in disbelief, consumed by the thought that in just a single day that brat had managed to defeat not only him but everyone else as well. Meanwhile, Ichijo brought up the topic they had discussed earlier that afternoon. Tashiki, already resigned to his fate, admitted that the organization wouldn't forgive him anyway, and he had no other option left. Still, he couldn't understand why he was the one chosen. Ichijo casually explained that their meeting had simply been a coincidence. Tashiki accepted that reasoning, knowing that if not for that coincidence, he would likely be the one lying beaten on the ground. Turning to practical matters, Tashiki asked what Ichijo planned to do about the aftermath. Ichijo offered Tashiki the territory, reminding him of his earlier promise to promote him. Though uncertain, Tashiki agreed to try. He knew the incident would spread quickly throughout the organization, putting them both at risk. He asked about the next steps and what role he should play. Ichijo responded, stating that it would be inconvenient for him to appear publicly, so Tashiki would act as his older brother. Just like that night, Ichijo promised to grow Tashiki's influence and push him up the ranks. Ichijo then demanded all the organization's money, emphasizing his need for a large sum of cash. Shocked, Tashiki hesitated, admitting there were countless things he wanted to say but didn't know where to begin. Realizing words wouldn't change anything, he agreed to go along with the wild plan and raised a mental toast. Ichijo reminded him that he was still a high school student and bluntly asked if he had any money. Tashiki couldn't believe he was being mugged. Reluctantly, he handed over the cash he had on him, saying he would get more if it wasn't enough. Ichijo noted it was just enough for taxi fare. Tashiki was stunned to realize he had teamed up with someone so broke. He began to think he must be going senile. Ichijo moved on to serious matters, asking about Tashiki's allies and funding. Tashiki reported around 50 people at Hiraguri's place, a team skilled in cleaning up messy situations. Compared to his own subordinates, they were better equipped, even possessing firearms provided by the organization. With his 30 people added in, their combined strength would more than double. But when it came to funding, Tashiki explained that both he and Hiraguri were at the bottom, receiving very little money. The real control rested with higher-ups like Reset Scene Co., Yutu-Net, and Ogain Ren, who ran the casinos, bars, and nightclubs. Koei's Teragisa handled bodyguard services, and at the top of the hierarchy was their boss, Koyanagawa Tatsuya, who managed all the funds. Tashiki mentioned an upcoming birthday celebration for Koyanagawa where presents were expected, tributes disguised as gifts. The more money given, the more one's status increased. He and Hiraguri had been desperately collecting money, but after learning about Ichijo's plan, none of it seemed to matter anymore. Ichijo told him not to worry and assured him that he would soon rise to that position. Tashiki brushed it off, having already accepted Ichijo's recklessness. He realized he had been foolish to think Ichijo might get scared and back out. Tashiki then suggested they exchange contact information, but Ichijo didn't even have his cell phone. Tashiki, shocked once again, couldn't believe how poor this guy really was. Ichijo asked if he should leave the unconscious men behind or stay. Tashiki assured him he had already called people and would handle everything from there. Just then, Mineta and the other subordinates arrived. One of them pointed out that all of Hiraguri's men had been taken down, and upon seeing Ichijo, silently wondered what he was doing there. Ichijo said goodbye and began walking away. Tashiki called Mineta over, asking to borrow his recently acquired phone. He handed it to Ichijo, telling him it had all the necessary contact information. Mineta stood frozen in surprise. Ichijo declined, but Tashiki insisted. He placed a hand on Ichijo's shoulder and reminded him they were comrades now. More importantly, Tashiki emphasized that he couldn't afford to lose his lifeline. Ichijo removed the hand from his shoulder and told Tashiki not to overthink things, he just needed to follow orders. Then he began walking away. Tashiki turned to Mineta and asked if that guy was really his classmate. Mineta admitted it, though until recently he had just been a wimp. Tashiki couldn't believe a mere wimp could take down all of Hiraguri's men alone. Mineta, in shock, repeated the words by himself, struggling to accept it. Tashiki remembered the killing intent he had sensed from Ichijo earlier. It was clear Ichijo was still wary of them. They hadn't yet earned his full trust. As Ichijo walked down the street, he read Tashiki's message sent through Mineta's phone. It stated that they'd be heading to the casino the next night and advised Mineta to get proper rest. After reading it, Ichijo mused that Tashiki was truly insane. The word comrades echoed in his mind, but it held no real meaning for him. Nearby, excited girls watched a celebrity named Ijuan on a large screen. Ichijo caught sight of him on the broadcast and reminded himself that he didn't need comrades. He had only one goal: revenge. The man on screen, the target of his wrath, was the son of a president whose company ranked among the world's top 10. In his previous life, right after the Great Catastrophe, that company had been the first to analyze survival rules. The group had mobilized their subordinates to gather materials, expanded their inventories, and hoarded vast supplies. Even when the world descended into chaos, their unmatched talent and management skills kept them above the rest. Despite being reborn, Ichijo knew he couldn't even make contact with them in his current state, let alone take revenge. He needed massive amounts of money, not only for his revenge but also to prepare for the coming catastrophe. He had to think beyond himself. He needed to weaken their forces and find opposition before the disaster hit. Recalling the name Nozomi, he vowed to return the pain tenfold. At a bus stop, a woman snapped him out of his thoughts, telling him to move if he wasn't getting on. He apologized, but then something strange happened. The woman began to appear like a zombie. Confused, he wondered why he was seeing this, since the catastrophe hadn't occurred yet. A passerby brushed off his reaction as stress, and they quickly moved on. Ichijo wondered if it had been a hallucination. He tried to trace the source, recognizing it from the moment he was reborn. A glowing zone appeared before him. Ichijo realized it was a special zone and questioned why it appeared before the catastrophe. Strangely, no one else seemed to notice it, not even those inside. The voice rang out again, urging him to enter. Rushing forward, he darted in front of a moving car, prompting the driver to yell in fear. Ichijo remained focused. If the zone was real and he was the only one capable of entering a full month in advance, the items inside were unobtainable in the real world. He could use them to expand his inventory and prepare for the apocalypse. With no time to hesitate, he decided to enter, even if it meant taking extreme risks. System notified Special Zone Entry Level 1. Ichijo never imagined he'd be able to enter a zone this early. As he arrived, his eyes caught a sudden prompt flashing before him, a special mission. The monitor displayed, Special Mission. Defeat 15 normal zombies and 1 mutant zombie within 1 hour and find the safety house. The surprising reward made him pause. A 5x reward. Was this his unique mission? There had been nothing like this in his previous life. Perhaps it was connected to his rebirth, or that mysterious voice he heard earlier. Regardless, this situation clearly worked in his favor. His focus shifted to the challenge ahead. Clearing this mission was now the priority. Back in his past life, just locating a safety house during his first zone run had been a struggle, but now he had to defeat 15 regular zombies and 1 mutant within a strict time limit. He needed to prepare thoroughly. He reminded himself that upon entering a zone, the system always dropped players into a relatively safe area. There, one could gather basic survival supplies. However, beyond those basics, all other resources had to be obtained within the zone itself. Ichijo gathered everything he could find, thinking it better to take it all. Even if some items weren't used this time, they could be useful later. But survival tools weren't the most vital things in a zone. The truly important resources were magic ore and crystal stones, both typically found inside safety houses. Magic ore, when combined with money, allowed players to expand their inventory. It was stored in a private backpack, and its quality came in 4 ranks. Higher zones increased the probability of finding higher quality ore, which directly improved inventory efficiency. Alongside that, crystal stones held special elements. Developed further during the late apocalypse, these stones became essential ingredients for potions and played a crucial role in humanity's survival within zones. Together, magic ore and crystal stones became humanity's talismans in a crumbling world. Once Ichijo left this safe zone, the real challenge would begin. But if this zone appearance wasn't a coincidence, he had the chance to gather a month's worth of resources in advance. However, there was a rule. Once the starting point was passed, there was no turning back. This mission demanded 3 elements, but the most critical among them was time. Although he retained fragments of his past life's strength, he couldn't afford to be overconfident. His current body was far weaker. Even in a beginner zone, facing 16 zombies, including a mutant, wouldn't be easy. For now, securing the safety house's location could give him an escape route if things went south. But even so, the mission's difficulty and the zone's atmosphere felt different from what he remembered in his previous life. His instincts kicked in. Just one step more and he would have triggered a fatal encounter. The zombie in front of him may have been beginner level, but its power and speed far outmatched any human. A single bite would mean infection. Without immediate treatment in a safety house, the transformation into a zombie was guaranteed. From his current perspective, even a regular zombie was a formidable threat. Once they locked onto prey, they never let up, and conventional means couldn't stop their relentless pursuit. But Ichijo remembered their weakness, the head. A single accurate blow could take them down. The monitor confirmed his progress, defeated 1 normal zombie. Remaining time, 56 minutes. Houses in beginner zones were typically easy to locate. Most were positioned opposite the starting point. He decided to proceed in that direction. Being the only one in this zone, he had no margin for error. He needed to conserve energy, avoid group encounters, and preserve his strength for the final challenge, the mutant zombie. Suddenly, a warning alert appeared. Special mission. Gashin, rank 10. Arms are enhanced and possesses superior power. His heart sank. A mutant zombie was already here. Gashin had made its appearance far earlier than expected. He knew this monster's reputation. Gashin was notoriously violent. Its raw strength could crush a person the moment it caught them. In the early days of his previous life's apocalypse, countless people had died at its hands. A head-on fight was suicide. The terrain around him was poor for combat. He needed to relocate immediately. Ichijo recognized that Gashin's power far exceeded his own. But he also remembered something. Despite its strength, Gashin's attack patterns weren't very different from regular zombies. If he could exploit that trait and lure the beast into terrain that favored him, he might stand a chance. But soon, more zombies closed in. He found himself surrounded. This couldn't be where he died. Not here. He clenched his fists, rage and determination flooding in. The humiliation he suffered in his past life, the betrayal. He refused to fall again. He would survive. He would get his revenge. And most of all, he would reclaim his honor with his own hands. Ichijo threw his opponent with a powerful blow, hurling him across the room. In that moment, he was taken aback. The enemy's quick reaction was far beyond his expectations. It missed the perfect opportunity to finish it. With his current strength, even striking the enhanced arms of the enemy wouldn't inflict enough damage. The situation was turning out to be much more difficult than he had anticipated. His thoughts immediately shifted to the safety house. He remembered its location on the first floor. He needed to move closer, just in case things escalated even further. Suddenly, the zombie lunged at him from behind, but Ichijo narrowly avoided it, causing the creature to stumble and fall. He let out a breath, momentarily relieved, but the persistence of the undead kept pressing. More zombies began closing in. Ichijo fought them off, swinging the controlled fury. He shouted while struggling to keep them back, trying to maintain his balance and composure. Amid the chaos, the massive zombie returned. It launched itself toward him, crashing down with its full weight. In the cramped space, Ichijo took a quick glance at the supplies around him. Only bandages and an axe. Not exactly tools that could help him complete the mission. The pressure mounted. He couldn't afford a single mistake. This moment was the beginning of his revenge, the foundation of everything to come. He made a quick decision. He had to retreat to the safety house for now. Putting distance between himself and Gashin was his best chance to survive. But just as he turned, the sound of heavy footsteps made it clear he had been spotted. A curse escaped his lips. The area was becoming more dangerous by the second. Then a chance. His eyes locked on a visible wound. He focused. Now was the time to target it. With no better options, Ichijo committed to his strategy. He would slowly wear down Gashin's combat power, even if it meant inching forward with every swing. But the axe he carried, it wouldn't last much longer. The closer a zombie gets to death, the more violent it becomes. Their aggression doubled in that near-death state. Gashin was now using only one arm. If Ichijo could disable the remaining one, he might be able to end this. He launched another strike. It connected, but the zombie didn't flinch. It wasn't enough. He gritted his teeth. It was just a little more. Just one more push, and yet, his limbs refused to move. Fatigue and injury had taken their toll. He was frozen in place. The reality hit him. If he got bitten now, it would all be over. He would become a zombie, just like in his previous life. Frustration consumed him. Where had he gone wrong? Why was he being forced to endure all this again? He had struggled desperately to survive back then, fought with everything he had. And yet, in the middle of despair, a voice echoed faintly. Do it. The words came from somewhere beyond. At first, unclear, but slowly they became sharper, stronger. The voice belonged to the girl zombie Ichijo had killed earlier. And she spoke again, told him to get his revenge. Ichijo felt a strange warmth pulse through his body. His wounds were healing rapidly, closing up completely in seconds. Shock settled in as he realized he had been infected by the zombie virus, yet he wasn't transforming. On top of that, his injuries were gone without a trace. It was impossible. The virus should have taken hold, yet something within him was counteracting it. He suspected it was related to the mysterious voice he heard earlier. The voice didn't feel foreign. It was familiar, like it came from within. A realization struck him. He had definitely heard that voice before. Memories came flooding back. In his previous life, he had encountered a level 100 zombie named Tail. Back then, his mind had been consumed by rage and focused only on reaching this safe house. But he remembered the final moment before he was defeated. At that time, the domain had already collapsed. Both he and Teal should have turned into zombies and emerged into the real world. But now he was certain Teal had entered him before the domain vanished. She had come back to this world with him. She was inside him. Everything made sense now. The vision of the domain before the great catastrophe, his immunity to the zombie virus, his new regenerative ability. These were all because of her. But that raised another question. Was he still even human? The irony stung. He had survived this long thanks to the power of a zombie, the very creature he once hated. But none of that mattered now. If it helped him get revenge, he was ready to give her control over his body. Using his zombie's power meant his vengeance could advance even faster. The traitors, Hope and the other four, would all pay for what they did. Their time was coming. His breath was ragged as he finally reached the safety house. The spoils of war awaited him beyond the shimmering transfer gate. The place matched the level 1 safe house from his previous life. Everything was as it should be. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the space. A beginner magic stone lay before him. The domain was real. This was reality. Even the rewards were 5 times higher, just as the mission stated. He wondered if the items could be used the same way they were in his past life. His inventory was currently at level 1. If he used 5 beginner magic stones, he could push it to level 3. Without hesitation, he opened his inventory. 2 stones were consumed to reach level 2. Another 3 were used to level up again. His inventory expanded by 5 slots. A success. The domain began fading. He was exiting. As expected, the magic stones still worked. The upcoming months would be critical. Not only were the spoils 5 times as much, but the stat increases from clearing the domain were multiplied as well. There was one last thing to confirm. He pulled out the crystal. It was laced with the zombie virus. When processed properly, it could be used to create a variety of potions, but he didn't know much about it yet. Mishandling it could easily result in a human turning into a zombie. Just then, chaos unfolded nearby. A drunken man harassed a girl in the street. She tried to fend him off, rejecting his touch, but he wouldn't listen. Ichijo purposely bumped into the man, causing a brief distraction. In that moment, he secretly implanted the crystal into the man's body. The drunkard, unaware, wandered off for another drink. The next day arrived. The area was cordoned off. Authorities stood at the scene, urging people to cooperate and not destroy evidence. Rumors spread someone had died in the alley. The condition of the body was said to be abnormal. Another patrol car arrived on site. Officers grumbled about receiving a call-out first thing in the morning. The senior investigator, Mr. Kurozono, was approached by his team. They told him they'd never seen a scene like this before. Meanwhile, a girl caught a glimpse of the body and froze in fear. The lifeless figure lying in the alley wasn't just a corpse. Something about it terrified her to the core. The strong stench lingered in the air as Mr. Kurozono approached the body. He immediately recognized it: alcohol poisoning. He ordered the case to be processed as an accident, sarcastically congratulating the officer for boosting his arrest rate once again. The officer turned to the girl and credited her for the discovery, thanking her. Kurozono called out to his companion, instructing Natsume and Tsuoka to leave as the job was done. Natsume hesitated, questioning if they were truly ending it there. She expressed her concern, believing it wasn't a simple matter. She suggested collecting a blood sample for testing, but Kurozono shut her down firmly, stating that if he said it was over, then it was. She insisted the blood looked abnormal. Kurozono reminded her of her status as a trainee and warned her not to get carried away just because she had studied abroad. He ordered her to follow his instructions, adding that if she wanted a good evaluation for her graduation practical, she should stop meddling. When she tried to argue further, he told her to get out of the way. Natsume brought up a witness testimony that mentioned a minor altercation between the deceased man and a student the night before. Kurozono remained unfazed. In the background, Ichiju observed everything. He had wanted to confirm if the zombie virus could infect humans even before the apocalypse began. Now it seemed the results were in. There would be no transformation before the apocalypse. But another critical matter had become clear to bring Natsume into his group. Natsume Atsuoka was no ordinary girl. In her previous life, she had been a gifted pharmacist who used crystal stones within the domain to develop powerful potions. Her work suppressed the side effects of the zombie virus to a remarkable extent. Even the strongest warriors had relied on her. This was all driven by her insatiable curiosity. But that same curiosity eventually became her downfall. She turned herself into a test subject for her own potion development and paid the price with her life. Ikiju saw immense potential in her. If she could produce potions for him again, his combat power, both in reality and the domain, would increase drastically. Natsume called out to Kurozono, but Ishiju was already determined. In this life, he would make her his comrade. Frustrated by Kurozono's attitude, Natsume decided to investigate alone. Ishiju approached her and introduced himself as the high school student she was looking for. Elsewhere, Tashiki questioned his subordinate about renting such a place and why they were cleaning it so thoroughly. Ichiju arrived and asked about their progress. Tashiki confirmed that everything was set up and asked how Ichiju had known about the unused laboratory. Ichiju simply said it was word of mouth. One of Tashiki's teammates noticed Natsume and was stunned by her beauty. Natsume entered and expressed her surprise at the size of the lab. The cleaning was complete, but she admitted she didn't know how to operate the machines. Ichiju thought back to his past life. This was the very lab she had used after the apocalypse arrived. Ichiju told Toshiki he would speak with Natsume privately and ask him to wait. Toshiki, watching Ichiju prepare such a lab for Natsume, wondered who she was. He couldn't understand what Ichiju was planning and even speculated whether it might be an elaborate seduction tactic. As Ichiju spoke to Natsume, he showed her something and concluded that the man had died because of it. Natsume demanded to see it, but Ichiju stopped her from touching it with her bare hands. He insisted it was too important and promised to investigate the substance's structure himself. Natsume, sensing an ulterior motive, asked why he had brought her to such a place. Ichiju acknowledged her sharp instincts and admitted he needed her help analyzing the crystal stone. She questioned why him and not Kurozono, who was more qualified. Ichiju recalled her past, how she had gone abroad during middle school, majored in forensic medicine, and won numerous awards. Recently, she had returned to Japan and was now working as a forensic intern. Realizing how much he knew about her, Natsume asked if he had a purpose in seeking her out. Ichiju confirmed that he did. He told her that from that point onward, everything was highly classified. But before saying more, he wanted to confirm one thing, whether she was willing to become one of their comrades. If she agreed, she would have full access to the laboratory and as many crystal stones as she needed. He would also cover all research expenses. She would see a completely different world than before. But if she refused, the conversation would end there, and he assured her it would. As expected, Natsume quickly understood. She explained that the crystal stone contained a virus that caused death in a unique way. Unlike normal death, the body moved unconsciously. It was no longer human. Ichiju noted that although the corpse hadn't moved, his body had visibly strengthened even in death. If it had moved, it would have had far greater strength than when it was alive. That was what they called the living dead, or zombies. He revealed that the crystal stone contained two components, one that caused zombification and one that enhanced bodily functions. His request was for her to completely separate the two and create a potion that enhanced human physical abilities. It was an extremely difficult task, requiring the purity of the extracted component to be as close to 100% as possible. The potion's rarity depended on that purity. Natsume was shocked. She asked if that meant the previous corpse would eventually move. Ichiju confirmed that it would, though not right away. He understood she had many questions, but for now, he needed her to focus solely on researching the crystal stone. He had already arranged a residential room for her on the floor below, allowing her to live there while she worked. As he prepared to leave, she stopped him and asked for his name. He introduced himself, Shinya Ichiju. Ichiju called Hatano and ordered Mineta to stay behind and support Natsume. Mineta acknowledged the order. As Hatano and Ichiju left, they talked about their next move. Hatano asked where they were going and how Hiragiri was doing. Ichiju replied that everyone was following him, or rather, following Big Brother. Hatano corrected him, insisting Ichiju wasn't Big Brother anymore. He was the boss, and he needed to act like it. The domain had been confirmed as real. The potions were no longer a major concern. The only thing left was money. Ichiju silently ordered Hatano to get ready. Their next destination was clear: time to meet Big Money. By the age of 20, Renogane had already stained his hands with blood. He had stopped at nothing to climb the ranks, gaining his current position through relentless and brutal methods. Now, he oversaw the entertainment branch of the organization, with his main operations revolving around casinos and nightclubs. Among them, the casino was his largest source of income. Inside, crowds flocked daily. Shouts of excitement echoed as gamblers placed bets and celebrated victories. A customer shouted with joy after a win, while others pushed all their chips in, desperate to change their lives. But the truth was far darker. Only a few ever emerged victorious. Most left behind only regrets and unfulfilled desires, returning again and again in hopes of reclaiming their losses. Those desires were carefully exploited. Losers were offered loans, dragging them deeper into debt. A desperate man begged for more time, promising to repay everything. He was reminded of his total debt, 10 million yen. Shocked, he argued he had only borrowed 2 million. But exorbitant interest had been added, clearly stated in the promissory note. When he failed to repay, the threat turned personal. His daughter had just started kindergarten. The threat was made clear. If he couldn't pay, his family would suffer. Enraged, the man swore vengeance, but it was too late. As always, a pinky was cut off and sent to the debtor's family. The organization then demanded 16 million yen in exchange for the hostage. These were Renovane's ruthless methods. Through such practices, he secured nearly all the organization's funds, already amounting to tens of billions. Soon after an announcement was made, Renovane wished to meet with Hatano and his team. Tashiki and his subordinate arrived, but the guards tried to intervene. Tashiki ordered them to stand down. The room filled with tension as Ren Ogane greeted them with cold familiarity. He had heard about Hiragiri's domain and confirmed its authenticity. Then came the real reason for the meeting. With the boss's birthday approaching, Tashiki suggested doing something special. Ren Ogane, never one for empty deals, offered a trade. He would help Tashiki stand out in front of the boss, but in return, he wanted both Toshiki and Hiragiri's domains. The demand was outrageous. Tashiki had risked his life for that domain and now was expected to give it away for free. Insulted, he lashed out, calling Ren a pathetic old man. But Ren only laughed, calling Tashiki foolish for coming so easily, with only 3 men. Toshiki's subordinate panicked. The casino security alone numbered 100. To them, it looked like suicide. But Tashiki remained calm. He ordered his men to follow his instructions. They wouldn't rely on sheer numbers. The goal was to reduce unnecessary casualties. A diversion at the other entrances would buy time. As the plan began, Tashiki reminded them to act strong when dealing with money. As the boss, he took the lead, commanding his men to move as instructed. His subordinate hesitated, then swore to carry it out. A clash erupted. Ren shouted for his men to attack. Chaos broke loose as fighters charged. Tashiki and his comrades were under siege. A powerful subordinate of Ren Ogane entered the fray. His presence alone caused tension. He was Ren's strongest shield, a fighter who had kept him safe through countless battles. The strike came swiftly, but missed. Ichiju checked on his ally, who confirmed he was fine. Compared to their enemy from yesterday, this one was much slower. Still, they were warned to remain cautious. The battle had to be contained to avoid disturbing the customers. Orders were acknowledged. But Ren, watching from above, gave his final command without hesitation. He ordered them all to be killed. At that moment, the real fight ignited. Tashiki and Ichiju faced off against Ren Ogain. Blows were exchanged with deadly precision. Ren moved with calculated aggression, backed by his overwhelming authority and cruelty. Tashiki struck with fury, the weight of past losses behind every punch. Ichiju fought with sharp focus, using every ounce of experience. The room became a battlefield, a clash between the cold-blooded kingpin and two men with nothing left to lose. As the fierce clash raged on inside the casino, Ichiju faced Ren Ogain's top bodyguard head-on. His gaze locked onto the man's leg, his next target. He charged forward, aiming to sever it cleanly. Ren Ogain watched in disbelief. What he witnessed seemed impossible. Outside the chaos, anxious voices filled the air. One shouted out, wondering if backup had arrived yet. A subordinate burst in, calling out to Tashiki and apologizing for the delay. Tashiki demanded an answer, questioning why there were so few reinforcements. The subordinate explained that all the roads leading to the casino were mysteriously congested, preventing backup from arriving in time. Back inside, Ichiju confronted Ren. He asked what the blockade was Ren's doing. Ichiju admitted it. He had orchestrated the entire thing. Ren, enraged, shouted that his remaining men were more than enough to kill them. He promised them 2 million yen if they succeeded, but the promise went unheard. In a sudden shift, everyone witnessed something shocking. Ren Ogain fell from his office, collapsing to the floor below. His elite bodyguards were already lying defeated. Silence gripped the room. Whispers spread among the crowd. People recognized Ren as the casino's owner, the one who ruled over this mountain of money. Confusion grew. Some wondered if this was an internal conflict. Others stared in disbelief. One man had taken down all of Ren's elite guards by himself. Tashiki stepped forward, calm and composed. He introduced himself with authority. From that day forward, he would be the new owner. His name was Hatano Toshiki. As a gesture to mark the occasion, he announced a gift minus 10,000 chips for every customer. The crowd erupted in joy. Cheers filled the casino. Gratitude echoed through the halls. Just as the celebration began, a new presence arrived. The atmosphere shifted again. The crowd whispered. It was Ijuin. Shock rippled through the guests. Many questioned why someone like him was here. Ijuin approached, casual and composed. He greeted Toshiki and mentioned that he often came here to relax. After hearing the commotion from the VIP room, he came to investigate. He glanced around at the mess and commented on the situation. Ren Ogain, after all, was a friend of his. Tashiki tried to extend a hand of friendship, suggesting they could become allies moving forward. But Ijuin responded coldly, warning Toshiki that his tone was dangerous. Tashiki felt a terrifying pressure, an overwhelming bloodlust radiating from Ijuin. Turning to Ichiju, Ijuin asked if he needed help. He observed Ichiju's youthful appearance and guessed correctly. He was still a student. Ichiju's thoughts turned grim. He realized these men had been plotting long before the current events. Their coordination wasn't recent, and had begun from the very start. He thought of the names involved: Minago Tatsuhiro, Ishizaki Lala, Rick, and Iraman Ijuin Kibu. These were not ordinary people. They were heirs to corporations that ruled the financial world. Even after the arrival of the apocalyptic world, they had continued to live carefree lives. They had cleared all obstacles long ago. The trap set for him had been planned far in advance. Near the broken figure of Ren Ogain, the desperate man crawled toward Ijuin, grabbing his leg and pleading for help. Ren begged him, Kibukan, to save him. He promised he would pay, no matter how much it cost. But Ijuin remained unfazed. One of his bodyguards, respectful and loyal, mentioned he owed Ren a debt from the past. Ijuin brushed it off. None of it mattered anymore. He turned to Ichiju. Taking care of someone like him, he said, was easier than having breakfast. If not for the crowd, he would have killed Ichiju on the spot. But Ichiju got lucky and walked away with his life. With nothing more to say, Ijuin turned to leave. Before exiting, he warned Ichiju they would meet again. He gave instructions to look into the boy. His subordinates acknowledged. Back in the casino, Tashiki addressed the customers. He urged everyone to continue enjoying themselves. The promised chips would be distributed soon. The celebration resumed. Ichiju watched everything, his mind seething. He had almost finished them right there. But he wouldn't allow them to die so easily. Not yet. Not until he had dragged every one of them into the depths of despair. After the dust settled from the battle, Ichiju turned to Ijuin with calm authority. He asked if the message had been received. More importantly, he demanded the total earnings from the casino for the day. Caught off guard, Ijuin hesitated before replying. He wasn't sure of the exact amount and said he would check later. Ichiju didn't wait for the details. He gave a direct order to use all the earnings to buy gold. It had to be a spot transaction. Ijuin asked why. The request seemed unusual. Ichiju dismissed the question. The reason was none of Ijuin's concern. He didn't care how expensive the gold was as long as it was bought and delivered to the lab. With that, Ichiju said he had something to do and left for home. As he walked away, thoughts flooded his mind. Inventory capacity could only be expanded up to level 10 using beginner magic stones. But to go beyond level 10, another rare material was needed: gold. To reach level 11, 360 units of gold were required. From there, the demand would rise exponentially. In the apocalyptic world, vast amounts of gold had been consumed and depleted quickly. Understanding this, Ishiju knew he had to stockpile supplies while he still could. His top priority was expanding the inventory. He decided to leave the task of gold procurement to Hatano, while he focused on locating special domains. Suddenly, something shifted in the air. Ishiju sensed a reaction. It was faint but distinct. A special domain had revealed itself. He immediately looked toward the source. His eyes locked on the direction. It was a school. A special domain had appeared at that school. The scene shifted to a typical day at school. In Ichiju's absence, a nerdy student had taken over his seat. But two boys soon approached, mocking him for doing so. The student nervously muttered Ichiju's name, questioning if he was okay. One of them brushed it off, saying Ichiju couldn't return anyway, as he had been taken away by Mineta. They assumed he was likely in the hospital and justified taking the seat as simply using what was left behind. Still, the boy complained that it was inconvenient without his errand boy around. Suddenly, Ichiju entered the classroom. One of the bullies snapped at him to leave or face consequences. Shocked, the student muttered disbelief. The other hesitated, reminding him Ichiju had even hit Mineta. They couldn't believe he was back completely unharmed. Rumors and whispers spread across the class. Was it good news that he returned, or disappointing? The student quickly covered up his surprise, claiming he was happy and grateful Ichiju had stood up for him. Elsewhere, Ichiju thought back to the previous night. When he came to the school, the domain hadn't yet appeared. He wondered if this generation wasn't fully over, maybe he could still sense the domain's emergence. His instincts told him it would descend the next day. Just then, Ame Miki, the class idol, approached him. In his previous life, Ichiju had also been completely under her control. Her beauty captivated all the boys, turning them into her obedient followers. She mentioned missing the breakfast Ichiju usually bought for her and demanded he get it now so they could eat together. She even confessed she had considered replacing him as her errand boy. But Ichiju coldly refused, calling her an eyesore and telling her to buy it herself. Miki blinked in surprise, pretending not to hear him. The boys nearby erupted in anger. They accused him of disrespecting Miki and demanded gratitude for her even speaking to him. Miki tried to de-escalate the situation, saying they were all classmates. But the others weren't satisfied. One of them declared Ichiju wouldn't understand until he was taught a lesson. They moved to attack him. Ichiju, unfazed, scoffed internally. He remembered how, in his past life, he had been bullied by guys like these. Now he couldn't believe he had once feared them. More yelling followed. They told him not to get cocky just because he beat Mineta. But at that moment, Mineta appeared. Everyone was stunned to see him back on his feet. One student whispered in disbelief. Mineta approached, clearly seeking revenge, and his lackeys were fired up. They shouted at Ichiju to back off, calling Mineta Big Bro, surprising everyone. When had that happened? One boy hesitated, saying he had already eaten. Mineta barked at him to go buy his share. The boy meekly agreed. Then he turned to Ichiju and asked why his phone had been off. Etsuoka had tried calling several times with no response. That's why he came to school personally. Ichiju casually replied that he forgot to charge it. When asked what Etsuoka wanted, he said she had made an important discovery, possibly about the development of the horn. Ichiju acknowledged it and sent him back. The teacher called for the start of the lesson, asking students to open to page 50 of their textbooks. But Ichiju, deep in thought, knew this peaceful daily life was nearing its end. Suddenly, his system message appeared. Special domain entry, level 5. A special mission had begun. Entered the safe house in 20 minutes. Final reward, 5x. Ichiju felt the rush of entering a domain again. It had been a while. In his previous life, adapting to this sudden shift had taken time. But now he quickly assessed the situation. First, he needed usable items. He scanned his surroundings. Unfortunately, there were no recovery items. This domain was tougher than the last. Still, he prepared to move. This was now a battle against time. His first objective, locate the safe house. One advantage he had was perfect mapping. With his knowledge, he could drastically reduce exploration time. He quickly identified the safe house's location. It was in the school playground. But a problem immediately presented itself. The area was swarming with zombies. A forced breakthrough would be dangerous. There was no way he could defeat them all within 20 minutes. Then he noticed something. The zombies were gathering around a fallen one. Why were they moving so suddenly? It clicked. They had been lured by the sound of something hitting the ground. He had an idea. If he could generate a loud enough sound, he could draw the zombies away from the safe house. It was risky, but the only path to success. He looked toward a specific location, the only place where a sound loud enough could be made to attract all of them at once. If he could just get there, he could clear the safe house in one move. Ichiju stood at the edge of the school grounds, eyes locked on his target, the broadcasting room. That was the key to his plan. To lure the zombies away from the safe house, he needed to reach that room and create a noise loud enough to pull them all in one direction. He quickly recalled the school layout. He was currently in the central wing. The broadcasting room was located on the top floor of Building No. To get there, you would need to enter the connecting passage that linked the central wing to the target building. Once across, he'd sprint to the far end and take the stairs to the top floor. Without wasting time, Ichiju entered the narrow connecting passage. But just ahead, 3 zombies blocked his way. With no place to hide and knowing a detour would cost him precious minutes, he chose to confront them directly. He moved swiftly, striking each one down with precise, silent blows, making sure not to create any noise that could alert other zombies in the main building. After clearing the passage, he entered Building No. 4. The interior was more complex than he remembered, its maze-like corridors filled with shadows and blind corners. Though there were no zombies in sight, the building had too many places for enemies to hide. He didn't have time to come up with a perfect strategy. Improvisation would have to do. Racing through the hallway, Ichiju spotted the stairs leading to the broadcasting room at the end of the corridor. But just as he stepped forward, a sudden presence emerged. A zombie lunged from behind a pillar. It was an elite one. These weren't ordinary infected. They had retained their physical prowess from their former human selves. This one must have been an athlete. Before he could react, the zombie charged, slamming into a nearby locker and making a loud crash. The sound echoed through the corridors. That one sound was enough. It triggered a reaction across the school. The surrounding zombies began moving, all drawn toward the source of the disturbance. Ichiju cursed under his breath. He had no choice now. He dashed for the stairs. The halls began to fill with incoming threats. More and more zombies surged from both ends, responding to the echo. There was no way to avoid them all. One lunged toward him, its claw grazing his side. Then came the swarm. A wave of undead poured in from every direction, overwhelming the hallway. Ichiju was forced to retreat a few steps. The narrow corridor left little room to maneuver. With time running out and zombies closing in fast, Ichiju realized, now that it had come to this, his only option was to gamble everything. A single mistake here could mean death, but this was the decisive moment. Seizing this moment of chaos, Ichiju quickly slipped away and dashed through the corridor. He stumbled into an empty classroom and took cover, pressing himself against the wall to catch his breath. Behind him, the powerful zombie that had caused the diversion entered the same room. Meanwhile, in a distant lab, Natsume focused on her experiment. She concentrated on the difficult task of separating the 2 volatile elements. But no matter how carefully she refined the materials, the zombie-virus ratio within the magic ore remained too high. The purity level barely reached 60%. The virus content was far from safe. She had read through every document available but found no mention of a virus like this. Her thoughts turned to Ichiju, the only one who knew the source of the magic ores. But he had vanished at such a critical moment. The puzzles were even more. They not only possessed something so rare, but also knew how to use it with precise accuracy. She began to question whether Ichiju was truly just a high school student. Back inside the domain, Ichiju faced a formidable opponent, an elite boxer-type zombie. He struck it with a sharp kick and followed up with a precise slash using his kukri blade. Blood sprayed across the floor. He had deliberately used the scent of blood to lure the creature away. His previous wound had already healed, thanks to his unique ability. With the extracted blood now in his possession, he could avoid more unnecessary fights. But time was against him. Only 10 minutes remained. Suddenly, a sharp pain stabbed through his head. His vision blurred. A strange heaviness clouded his thoughts. His consciousness wavered. The reaction was too intense. It had to be connected to his healing ability. The more he used it, the more unstable his body became. It felt like he was carrying a ticking time bomb within him. Still, Ichiju clenched his fists with determination. He couldn't afford to be defeated by himself. Not now. Not ever. He vowed to end this once and for all. But he also realized the earlier noise might have drawn more zombies to his floor. Fighting again would be reckless. Stealth was now his best chance. The broadcasting room was just above him. He quietly moved through the hallway and entered another classroom. It was empty. No zombies in sight. He let out a breath of relief and approached the broadcasting equipment. Thankfully, it still worked. He powered it on. He had helped the broadcasting club a few times before, so he remembered exactly how to operate the system. Just as he began configuring the setup, a faint sound reached his ears. Something was approaching. He froze. Moments later, a horrific figure emerged from the darkness. A grotesque, battered zombie, far worse in appearance than any he had seen so far, stepped forward into the room. Ichiju narrowed his eyes. Tell it, zombie, don't enter without permission. Ichiju's eyes locked onto the creature before him as he quickly analyzed the situation. What he saw matched a textbook case of corpse bloating phenomenon, a process where gases of putrefaction build up inside a dead body, causing the soft tissues to expand unnaturally. The result was a grotesquely swollen form, and the zombie in front of him was no exception. This type didn't rely on physical strength. Its attack power was low, but what made it dangerous was its instability. Once bloated to the limit, it would burst without warning, releasing a shockwave-like blast along with a concentrated spread of the zombie virus. One explosion could easily kill nearby survivors, and worse, the noise would attract even more undead to the location. This thing had to be removed immediately. Without wasting another second, Ichiju turned and bolted from the room. His footsteps echoed as the bloated zombie lunged after him, but he was ready. With a swift move, he caught it mid-charge and slammed it down hard, throwing it away from himself and buying a brief window of time. But it wasn't over. As he caught his breath, he noticed more zombies beginning to approach. The sound from earlier must have alerted every creature on the floor. There was no time to relocate the swollen corpse. He decided to restrain its movement right there, doing whatever he could to hold it in place. Frustration crept into his thoughts. The earlier blast had been too loud. Now the entire floor was crawling with incoming threats. For now, he had only one option. He needed to buy time. Just as the tension reached its peak, Ichiju rushed into a control room, the very one used to announce school-wide broadcasts. Time was slipping through his fingers. With only 4 minutes remaining, he scrambled to begin the transmission. Blood loss was becoming critical, and if an elite zombie showed up on top of everything else, his fate would be sealed. Suddenly, he sensed something alarming. Every zombie was closing in on the very room he had entered. Panic built up, but he forced himself to stay focused. He couldn't waste a single second in that place. Just a little longer. The speaker crackled to life. The school's PA system blared. As soon as the broadcast started, the approaching zombies diverted toward the sound. Ichiju exhaled in relief. He had barely made it in time. The zombies began moving toward the speakers, but the path to the playground was still a concern. Without hesitation, he dashed for the staircase, even as more zombies crawled up from the 3rd floor. With their focus locked on the broadcast, he took the chance to break away. He planned to make a full-speed sprint to the safety house, dodging zombies along the way. But another wave approached, zombies from Building 1. A direct confrontation was now impossible. Even if he tried to fight his way through, time wasn't on his side. Realizing this, he pulled back and decided to wait for the perfect moment. It came swiftly. Without warning, he launched himself down to the next floor. The bursting noise of a bloated zombie exploding masked the sound of his landing. He quickly recalculated the shortest path to the playground, jumping from the connecting corridor to the gymnasium. With all the zombies drawn toward the earlier explosion and the loudspeaker broadcast, the playground should be temporarily clear. Just as he predicted, the area ahead looked accessible. Even if the zombies located the source of the noise, they'd need time to destroy it. But then came the worst news. He realized the zombies had already destroyed the speakers. Those had been installed at the very top of the school building. Still, Ichiju pressed on and landed in the playground. But his relief was short-lived. Behind him, the zombies began flooding in again. While running, he realized grimly that they were returning far too soon. One zombie broke through and struck him hard, while the rest closed in, surrounding him from all sides. He was so close, yet the portal to escape was now out of reach. Elsewhere in the laboratory, Natsume was buried in thoughts. She had so many tasks pending and was frustrated by Ichiju's absence. She spoke aloud, recalling that when living beings ingested the virus, they turned into zombies. The corpse she had seen yesterday was evidence of that. She wondered if someone could have ingested the virus willingly. Just then, a shadow crept outside the lab door. In the dim corridor, the same distinct zombie that had ended Ichiju's life in his previous timeline approached. But in the darkness, Natsume couldn't clearly see it. She heard a faint voice ask who she was, unaware of the danger waiting just a few steps away. Amid the chaos, the same zombie that had once killed Ichiju in his previous life suddenly appeared. It tore through the surrounding horde, striking down every zombie until the ground was littered with their lifeless bodies. The creature's cold gaze fixed on Ichiju as it approached, its movements deliberate and menacing. Fear surged through him as he stumbled back, his voice rising in a desperate cry for it to stay away. Before he could react further, he felt something strange beneath his feet. Thorn-like ropes sprouted from the ground, coiling around his legs and holding him in place. The zombie reached out, its cold hand gripping his chin and forcing his head upward. Its expression twisted, and a low, unsettling laugh echoed from its lips, filling the air with dread. Ichiju struggled to break free, demanding to know what it intended to do. Suddenly, panic overtook him. In a surge of fear, he grabbed Natsume by the throat, slamming her to the floor and pinning her beneath him, demanding answers. Yet in that instant, realization struck him. The figure beneath him was not a zombie at all, but Natsume herself. She calmly told him he had finally noticed the truth. Ichiju looked around in confusion, realizing he was back inside the laboratory. He questioned how he had returned and when it had happened. Natsume shoved him away, her movement causing the potion she had been holding to slip from her grasp. Just before it could hit the floor, she caught it, a wave of relief and satisfaction washing over her as she realized it was safe. Ichiju, still disoriented, muttered about her obsession with research. Offering his hand, he apologized for attacking her, admitting he had not realized it was her. He asked her to explain what had happened during the previous night. Natsume explained calmly. Ichiju had suddenly appeared there, and at first she had not recognized him. He had looked like a woman to her, his appearance unfamiliar and strange. Then he had collapsed. When she rushed to his side, she finally realized who he was. His body had been covered in wounds, his strength completely drained. She had quickly examined him and treated his injuries. Ichiju questioned her perception, but she admitted it had only been for a moment. The heavy rain the night before, combined with her exhaustion from a full day of research, might have made her see things incorrectly. Yet Ichiju denied it being a mistake. To him, the scene he had witnessed had not been a dream. He wondered why that thing had taken over his body and dragged him to this place. Natsume handed him a file urging him to look at his test results. Within the report, the zombie virus was confirmed to be present in his body. Surprisingly, his system had not rejected it. Instead, his body seemed to rely on it for survival. She explained that she had extracted the virus from him and fused it with the strain contained within a crystal stone. Something extraordinary occurred during the process. The two viruses had merged perfectly, leading her to inject the fused strain back into his body. Gradually, his wounds healed. However, the virus within him had been consumed in the process. Ichiju listened in shock, piecing together the truth. His rapid recovery ability was tied to the zombie virus. Each time he had recovered in yesterday's zone, his mind had grown hazy until he ultimately lost consciousness. In the end, that entity had taken control of him entirely. Natsume turned her attention back to him, demanding her own answers. She wanted to know whether he was truly human now or something else entirely, and why he possessed crystal stones that should not exist in this world. Ichiju responded by revealing his secret. He claimed to have leaped through time, arriving from a world 5 years in the future. That future had already collapsed into an apocalypse, with zombies rampaging across the globe. The present time was just 1 month before that devastation would begin. Natsume processed his words, realizing that the horrors she had witnessed the previous day would soon consume the entire world. He confirmed it, explaining that special zones teeming with zombies would emerge worldwide. Though difficult to accept, he assured her he had proof. He asked about his clothes, which she pointed out were hanging nearby. He decided against mentioning his inventory for now, silently assessing her. She seemed innocent, but he knew he could not afford to repeat the mistakes of his previous life. If she turned into an enemy, he would not survive. He silently reflected on his fortune, realizing he had been able to clear a special mission because of a zombie's intervention. When he opened his inventory, Natsume's eyes lit up with awe as she gazed at the items inside. Ichiju showed her the materials he had collected within a special zone, explaining that for certain reasons, he could already access them. She produced a potion and reminded him of their business together. The highest purity she had achieved before was 60%, and even after trying again yesterday, she had only reached 65. The potion's red hue marked it as a power potion, and she admitted her surprise at seeing it pushed to 70% in just 1 day. Ichiju observed her, silently acknowledging her genius. Natsume compared the crystal stone to the one he had given her previously, noting several differences. She examined multiple stones, curiosity flickering in her eyes before abruptly questioning him about his future. She wanted to know what she was doing 5 years from now and whether they had been comrades in his previous life. Ichiju revealed the truth with a heavy tone. The future version of Natsume was already dead. They had shared no connection in that world. She asked how he knew of her then and whether zombies had taken her life. He explained that he had only heard of her through rumors, spoken of as a genius pharmacist. Her death had not come from zombies but from her own experiments, using herself as a test subject. She accepted the revelation with quiet resolve, acknowledging that her future self would indeed choose such a path even in dire circumstances. Ichiju reassured her that he would not let her fall into danger this time. Her doubt faded as she listened, realizing the story aligned with her own nature. She agreed to believe him and vowed to support him with all her strength. With the tension easing, she suggested they finish the remaining tasks at hand, their work far from over. Soon after, Toshiki and Mineta arrived at the laboratory, each carrying heavy boxes of money. Toshiki had not expected a single box of cash to weigh so much, and both he and Mineta were exhausted, their clothes damp with sweat from the heat. As they entered the room, they froze at the sight before them. Ichiju and Natsume were in a strange position, with Natsume on top of him. She had only been trying to retrieve a potion from him, but the scene appeared entirely different. Mineta's jaw dropped, his eyes wide in shock, while Toshiki quickly apologized for arriving at such an awkward time. Without waiting, he grabbed Mineta and dragged him back outside. After a short while, the two returned, their steps hesitant. Natsume turned to Ichiju, apologizing, assuring him it had not been intentional. Ichiju dismissed the misunderstanding and asked where the money was. Toshiki explained that he had purchased everything available through regular channels, leaving nothing left on the market. There was still more cargo to be delivered later, aside from what they had brought now. Ichiju handed him a potion, instructing him to drink it. Toshiki hesitated, his voice shaking as he questioned what it was. Mineta urged him to trust them, assuring him he would understand after drinking. Toshiki reluctantly agreed and swallowed the liquid. The effects hit him immediately. A surge of overwhelming energy flooded his body, so intense he struggled to handle it. His eyes glowed a deep red and waves of raw, vibrant energy radiated from him. Seeing this transformation, Natsume turned to Ichiju with concern, remarking on how much Toshiki seemed to be suffering. A faint reading of 49% flickered across the monitor beside them. Ichiju remained calm, assuring her he was fine. Inwardly, Ichiju analyzed the situation. The potion's purity remained at 70%, a level far beyond what ordinary humans could withstand. Only someone with the strong physique of a professional athlete, like Atano, could endure such a dose. Since it was Toshiki's first time consuming it, his body would need time to adjust, but he would stabilize soon enough. Ichiju asked Toshiki about his condition. Despite his ragged breathing, Toshiki managed to smile, declaring that power surged through his entire body. To test it, he effortlessly lifted 2 heavy boxes of cash, marveling at how light they felt in his hands. Mineta could only stare in disbelief. With his strength returning, Toshiki relayed new information. Most of the money they had secured belonged to Ijuin's group, meaning they likely could not collect much more beyond this point. Ichiju acknowledged the report and ordered them to halt money collection for now. Their immediate priority was gathering their forces and unifying control. He resolved to seize full authority during the upcoming birthday celebration for Toshiki's boss. Privately, Ichiju considered the situation. The state of their finances was within his expectations, but what caught his attention was the potion's effect manifesting before any reaction from the zombie virus within the body. With a mind as capable as Etsuoka working on it, the purity could soon be raised to a level safe for ordinary humans. If Atano's subordinates could also consume the potions, he could entrust the management of the organization entirely to them. That would free him to focus his efforts on conquering special zones. He steeled his resolve, vowing silently. Before the apocalypse arrived, he would force Nozomi to surrender every last bit of wealth in her possession. In the following scene, Ijun was seen inside an upscale lounge where the dim lighting cast a soft glow across the polished surface of a billiards table. The room was quiet except for the occasional clack of pool balls and the low hum of conversation. Holding his cue with casual confidence, Ijun lined up his next shot. As he studied the table, he brought up a curious development. Someone had bought up all the gold available on the market. The news was startling and he turned toward Rick, seeking answers. Rick didn't have a specific name to offer, but the way it was done, fast, clean, and completely under the radar, made one thing clear. It wasn't the work of a lone player. This was the calculated move of an organized group. After all, acquiring the entire supply of gold in just a single day was no small feat, even for seasoned financiers. Adrian's gaze narrowed. He asked if there had been any developments in international politics or global markets that might explain this sudden activity. Rick, already ahead of the thought, said he had checked and confirmed that nothing unusual had occurred. The purpose behind this aggressive gold acquisition remained a mystery, but the consequences were undeniable. The market had gone into a frenzy. Prices had surged, and now, despite the hype, there wasn't a single gram of product left in circulation. Even more unsettling was the fact that every transaction had been carried out in physical gold, not paperback trades or digital assets. At that detail, Ijun finally looked up from the table. Physical gold? Rick confirmed it. Their group was one of the last few entities that still maintained a stockpile of real, tangible gold bars. He floated the idea of selling. With demand so high and supply non-existent, they couldn't name their price. And besides, the market had stabilized for now. Another spike seemed unlikely in the near future. Just then, the girl who had been quietly listening stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but her words were heavy with concern. She reminded them that this wasn't just any commodity. It was something they had spent years collecting, carefully accumulating their gold reserves bit by bit through calculated trades and strategic positioning. Giving it all up now, just because the price looked good, felt short-sighted to her. Rick gave a light chuckle and teased her for being a worrywart, but she didn't back down. She argued that in uncertain situations, caution was a strength, not a weakness. Until they knew who was behind the gold grab and why it was happening, they shouldn't move carelessly. The gold needed to be protected. It was more than just wealth. It was leverage, security, and power. Ejuan, saying nothing, leaned in and took his shot. The cue ball struck clean, sending another solid ball rolling neatly into a corner pocket. One of the other players at the table, who hadn't landed a single successful hit so far, stood back with a look of surprise and quiet frustration. He broke the silence, giving his opinion. The point of collecting the gold was to make money, he said. And when the value peaked, selling it was the natural move. However, he acknowledged that the final say rested with Ejuan. Without breaking his rhythm, Ejuan shifted the conversation. He asked Rick for an update on the old district acquisition plan, the other critical project on their agenda. Rick reported that negotiations were nearly done. Contractors had already moved into the area and the remaining residents were being dealt with. Talks were still ongoing, but the progress was solid. Adrian paused for a moment, then turned to Rick with a sharpened tone in his voice. He asked if Rick truly understood why they had all gathered here, what their mission was. Rick stammered slightly but replied that it was to produce results, no matter what it took. With another precise shot, Adrian dismissed the response. That kind of shallow resolve wasn't enough. What they were doing required more than basic outcomes. All of them had been born into powerful conglomerate families, handed privilege on a silver platter, but that privilege came with chains. No matter how hard they worked, no matter how capable they were, everything was still dictated by the old men sitting comfortably at the top. No matter what they achieved, society would always brand them as pampered hares, rich kids who had everything handed to them. And worse, it wasn't outsiders holding them back. It was their own bloodlines, their parents, their elders, blocking the way forward. Adrian's frustration was clear. He didn't want to wait anymore. He didn't want to be patient. The time had come for change, and he would force that change if he had to. Rick, now fully aware of the weight behind Adrian's words, quickly promised to handle the remaining issues with the old district by the next day. Ijun gave a nod of approval. For now, the gold sale would be put on hold. That was then, with the tension still thick in the room, Ijun turned to the girl. He asked about the boy who had been spotted at the casino the previous night. She replied that she had gone through the files and background information. Nothing concerning stood out. The boy's name was Ishijo Shinya. He was just an ordinary high school student, one who had suffered great loss early in life. Both of his parents had died in a traffic accident, and ever since, he had been surviving on his own. He worked multiple part-time jobs just to cover his basic expenses and tuition fees. As for why he was at the casino, according to what his classmates had shared, he had joined Hatano's organization. Lining up his next shot, Ijun asked if that was all. The girl confirmed it and awaited further instructions. There was no hesitation in Ijun's response. Ichijo was to be eliminated. The boy might prove to be a difficult target, but no traces were to be left behind. It had to be clean and absolute. The girl responded with quiet efficiency. She had expected such an order and had already made the necessary arrangements. On the other side, Ishiju was seen walking down a quiet road. Stopping at a corner, he opened his system window. The gold Hatano had collected was safely stored in his inventory. It wasn't much, but just enough to push him to level 15. For expansion, he still needed magic ore, another key material, and crystal stones vital for Natsume's research. As he reviewed his inventory, he suddenly sensed someone watching him. A suspicious man appeared in front of him carrying a knife with a twisted grin. He claimed to be a first-class assassin, amused by the irony of facing a high school student. Work had been slow lately, and now he was ready to kill for reward money. Reset-scan.co had placed a bounty on Ichiju's head. The man declared that Ichiju had chosen the wrong enemy. Charging at full speed, the assassin lunged forward, but Ichiju leaped over him in one smooth motion and landed behind. He grabbed the man's hair, snatched the knife from his hand, and held it to his mouth. Calm and deadly, Ichiju demanded answers, specifically if this ambush was Iju and Nozomi's doing. Terrified, the man confessed it was. Without hesitation, Ichiju struck him and sent him flying back. The assassin pleaded for forgiveness, trembling. Ichiju, glaring coldly, gave him a message to deliver. Now was not the time to settle things with Nozomi. He told him to wait and never show his face again. The man quickly nodded in fear and fled. As the threat vanished, Ichiju focused again. It was time to prepare for survival in level 8. The special zone level 8 activated. Through Time Leap, Ichiju had gained the rare ability to access special zones even before the Great Apocalypse began. This advantage came with both benefits and drawbacks. Until the apocalypse hit, he would have to face these zones alone. The danger would only grow from here. Zone levels were steadily increasing. If he wanted to stay safe, avoiding these zones would be the logical path. But with the resources in hand and memories of a past life, Ichiju could still outpace others once chaos erupted. However, that alone wouldn't be enough against the real powerhouses. Risks had to be taken. No matter how dangerous a zone became, he would take the challenge. It was the only way to close the overwhelming gap between him and Nozomi. Still, that battle was for another day. His current priority was acquiring underworld resources. If he hoped to face Nozomi on equal footing, he needed power and financial strength. Quainamo's birthday celebration was only 2 days away. That event would be the turning point where Ichiju planned to seize control. But before that, he had to gather more crystal stones and brew essential potions. To suppress the creature tied to his plan, large quantities of zombie virus were also required. For now, the creature seemed to be on his side, but he couldn't afford to let his guard down. Every member of the organization was already in motion, taking positions that would eventually decide their fate. And in the center of it all stood Ichiju, the one steering the wheel, the one shaping the fate of everyone involved. He needed to grow stronger. Then morning arrived quietly. Inside the lab, we see Natsume finally allowed herself a faint smile. Her face showed clear signs of fatigue, eyes dull with exhaustion and deep shadows beneath them, but her hands were steady as she held up the potion she had worked on all night without rest. Mineta, barely awake and still groggy, noticed her and asked what was going on. She gestured him over and handed him the potion. Before anything else could be said, the sound of elevator doors opening echoed across the lab. Ishiju stepped inside. Without a moment's pause, Mineta charged at him and swung a punch out of nowhere. Ichiju dodged cleanly. Mineta didn't stop, he attacked again, this time faster. But Ishiju was quicker. In his swift movement, he flipped Mineta over and pinned him to the ground. The confrontation ended as quickly as it had started. Natsume stood frozen, eyes wide with disbelief. That outcome shouldn't have been possible. She was certain the potion had worked, but even with the enhancement, Mineta was defeated in a single move. Then she understood. The potion could only do so much. If the person using it lacked strength, it wouldn't be effective. Still on the floor, Mineta admitted that the potion wasn't at fault. It was Ichiju. His level was simply beyond reach. Natsume immediately checked the data logs and confirmed it. It only stat altered with speed. Doubled, yes, but no other change. The potion was the speed booster, nothing more. Ichiju, unimpressed, reminded them that testing potions without him present was dangerous. But Mineta argued back, saying everything had been pre-planned, safely calculated. Ikiju turned his gaze toward Natsume, commenting on her hair. She responded with a proud smile, explaining that researchers needed a fresh start every day. He didn't bother replying and instead told her to focus. She nodded and grew serious again, explaining that the final dose had a boost cap of around 10%. Ikiju didn't say anything, but he understood. With beginner-grade crystal stones, 100% was the upper limit. The combat zones had been gradually getting stronger. So far, the highest was level 10. To obtain intermediate crystal stones, they'd need to clear something above level 15. At least Natsume's research aligned with his current pace, but this also meant he had to accelerate. He reassured her that none of it was her fault, then asked if she could produce more potions by nightfall. She agreed without hesitation, saying the formula was now fully memorized. A new batch would be ready before evening. Ikiju gave a short nod, then told Mineta to contact Toshiki. 2 hours later, Toshiki arrived. He and Ikiju moved to the far side of the lab, speaking in hushed voices. Meanwhile, back at the workbench, Natsume leaned toward Mineta and asked if Ikiju had always been like this. Mineta shook his head and explained that they had been classmates. He would know. The Ikiju he remembered had been quiet, bullied, even by him. But now he was composed, driven, and powerful, like someone completely transformed. Just a few days back, the same guy who used to get pushed around had now become someone everyone naturally looked up to, like a big brother figure. Natsume sat in quiet thought, observing. It was clear Ishiju hadn't told anyone about the regression, which meant nobody had a clue about the power he carried forward from his past life. And since he just returned recently, it was hard to read what exactly he was planning. Well, one thing was for sure. With all that knowledge from the future, he definitely wasn't just moving on a whim. Something big was coming. Somewhere else, Ichiju and Toshiki were talking in low voices. Ichiju mentioned that tonight was Kanyanagawa's birthday, a perfect setup. Every one of his men would be there. Toshiki asked cautiously if he was really going to go through with it. Ichiju didn't hesitate. He was going to do it. No matter what, it had to happen. He was going to take over Kanyanagawa's forces tonight. Toshiki let out a small sigh and rubbed his neck. Things had gone smooth so far, but Kanyanagawa wasn't someone to take lightly. That guy was in a different league. He suggested maybe they take it step by step, but Shiju shut it down immediately. There was no time to slow things down. They were going all in tonight. With the potions backing them up, their chances weren't bad at all. Toshiki didn't say more. He was ready to move. Ichiju said Natsume would prepare the potions in advance. Toshiki just had to make sure the number of fighters he brought matched the number of potions. Only the ones who could actually fight were coming. Tonight wasn't just another night. It was the night everything would flip. Toshiki had to play his role as boss perfectly. Ichiju would join them later. There were a few things he needed to take care of first. Far off in a hidden space, Kanyanagawa leaned back while asking his men if they had looked into the recent chaos spreading around. One of them reported back it was someone named Toshiki, a low-tier member. Apparently, this guy had been swallowing up territories one after another over the last few days. He'd even taken over Onren's base, and it looked like he was still planning to go further. Kanyanagawa's tone turned colder. He said expanding influence wasn't wrong. But Toshiki didn't seem to understand how things worked. There were people above him, and there were lines not to be crossed. And when a branch started growing too far, well, it got chopped off. As night fell, the city glowed. Kanyanagawa's birthday was in full swing, held in a high-rise packed with power players. We catch a glimpse of a scene where the wealthy man warns his servants to park his car properly, or else it might get scratched. Toshiki, standing at a distance, observed everything. Hiraguri whispered, asking if Ichiju still hadn't shown up. "Did you really bail last minute?" he asked, nervous. Toshiki stayed calm, told him to wait just a little longer. Even Hiraguri started getting restless. More people were arriving by the minute. If they waited too long, they'd be cornered. Toshiki said nothing, but deep down he was beginning to wonder. Why hadn't Ichiju come yet? Even though he had insisted that today was crucial, the moment things began to feel off, suspicion crept in. Toshiki couldn't help but wonder if Ichiju had set him up. But deep down he knew that wasn't the truth. If Ichiju had truly intended to kill them, he would have done it long ago, cleanly, without hesitation. There would have been no need for elaborate tricks. The men around Toshiki expressed their doubts, suggesting it might still be possible to pull back while there was time. To them, it seemed insane to challenge someone like Kanyanagawa with such a small and scattered force. But Toshiki silenced them coldly. Backing out now was no longer an option. They were too deep in. Hiraguri then stepped forward and asked Toshiki if they could speak in private. The two slipped into the restroom, away from the others. Inside, Hiraguri got straight to the point. He believed Toshiki was being greedy. Whether it was his own ambition or Ichiju's influence, Hiraguri wasn't sure. But this plan had gone too far. Toshiki stayed calm, insisting he was thinking clearly. He wasn't acting recklessly. Every move was calculated. Hiraguri admitted that Ichiju was certainly strong, and maybe following him before hadn't been a mistake. But this time was different. Kanyanagawa's stronghold was no mid-level gang territory. His full forces were gathered in one place, and worse, Hiju wasn't even with him yet. They were walking straight into a trap. To Hiragure, the only smart move was to backtrack. If they approached Kanianagawa humbly and apologized, they might avoid escalation. But Toshiki's expression darkened. After everything they had done, an apology? Hiragure stayed firm. This wasn't about pride, it was about survival. If the potion Toshiki carried was truly valuable, offering it up willingly might be their only way out. He told Toshiki to decide which side he stood on. Still, he reminded him the final decision was his. Whatever Toshiki chose, Hiragure would follow without complaint. At that moment, a loud announcement echoed through the area. The gatekeeper informed everyone that all participants had arrived. It was time to clean up and seal the doors. Before the doors closed, Toshiki and his men appeared just in time. Toshiki called out to delay the closure, his tone calm but tense. They weren't finished yet. High above, hidden from view, Ichiju watched the scene unfold through a special gust lens. His eyes narrowed as he observed Toshiki carefully, trying to determine what he was planning. Inside the grand hall, a subordinate approached Kanianagawa and whispered the news of Toshiki's arrival. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Toshiki entered confidently, closing the distance between himself and the old man seated at the center. Kanianagawa's eyes sharpened in recognition. He acknowledged Toshiki with a cold smile, clearly remembering him. Though Toshiki responded with casual charm, claiming he came to join the celebration, Kanianagawa wasn't deceived. His gaze turned suspicious. This didn't look like a man who had come to celebrate. Without a word, Kanianagawa's men began to surround Toshiki and his team prepared to strike. The tension in the room thickened. Toshiki raised both hands slightly, signaling peace. With a faint grin, he suggested they sit and talk first, trying to ease the growing hostility. Kanianagawa leaned back in his chair as one of his bodyguards stepped forward and lit his cigarette. The flame flickered briefly before the tip glowed red. He took a slow drag, the smoke drifting lazily through the air. His eyes settled on Toshiki, who stood before him with sharp intent. With a hint of amusement, Kanianagawa acknowledged the preparation Toshiki had made. In just a few days, Toshiki had managed to seize multiple territories, an aggressive, deliberate move. It was clear he wasn't here just to make a statement. Kanianagawa demanded to know his real motive. Toshiki stepped forward, waving away the smoke from Kanianagawa's cigarette as he spoke. There was no time for formalities. He stated clearly that the territories taken so far were just the beginning. His true objective wasn't small pieces of land, it was Kanianagawa's seat of power itself. That was the real target. As the final word left his mouth, Toshiki moved with sudden aggression, his fist flying toward Kanianagawa. But before it could connect, the bodyguard stepped in and caught the punch mid-air, gripping Toshiki's hand tightly. The tension in the room spiked. Kanianagawa exhaled a stream of smoke, still calm, and admitted he had expected Toshiki to meddle. But even he hadn't predicted this level of ambition. He realized now that he had underestimated him. In that brief moment, Toshiki twisted the bodyguard's wrist sharply and threw him down to the ground with force. Without hesitation, he turned to his allies and ordered them to engage. His team launched into action, clashing with Kanianagawa's men. The quiet tension erupted into a full-scale fight. Despite the chaos, Kanianagawa remained composed. He watched Toshiki's movements and acknowledged his skill. Toshiki was more capable than he had assumed, but strength alone wasn't enough to bring him down. Kanianagawa made it clear, if Toshiki believed that sheer force would be enough to defeat him, he was sorely mistaken. Just then, the bodyguard who had been slammed down rose again with explosive speed. He lunged upward, grabbing Toshiki by the face and slamming him hard to the ground. But Toshiki responded swiftly. Using the power in his legs, he locked the bodyguard in place, his grip firm and immovable. The guard's expression shifted to surprised. Toshiki's physical strength was beyond what he had expected. Anger, the bodyguard delivered a crushing punch that sent Toshiki flying across the room. He landed near a table, coughing from the impact. Rising again, the bodyguard calmly removed his blazer, preparing for a more serious fight. Kanianagawa looked at him and gave the order and the fight before the party began. The guard nodded with confidence. Though Toshiki's group showed some skill, there were only a few. He was confident he could end it quickly. Toshiki steadied himself, his mind racing. As expected of Kanianagawa's strongest bodyguard, this opponent was on another level. Even with the aid of potions, Toshiki was barely able to keep up. This was nothing like the battles he had faced before. His teammates, including Hiragure, were struggling as well. The difference in strength was staggering, and once the potion effects faded, their chances of victory would drop to zero. Still, this wasn't the time to hesitate. He knew this had to be a short, decisive battle. Any delay would lead to complete defeat. The bodyguard charged forward, initiating his first serious attack. As he approached, he called out to Toshiki, challenging him. But Toshiki reacted fast, ducking just in time. The guard missed his grab. Toshiki countered with a solid punch. The hit landed, but the bodyguard's expression turned cold. Fueled by rage, he drove his elbow hard into Toshiki's back. Toshiki cried out in pain as the blow landed cleanly. The bodyguard then lifted him effortlessly and flung him across the room. Toshiki slammed down near a table once again, groaning from the impact. From his position on the floor, Toshiki looked around. His allies were all struggling. They couldn't keep up with Kanyanagawa's elite guards. They were being outmatched in every way. The enemy formation remained intact, disciplined, and dangerous. Toshiki realized the harsh truth: they couldn't make a dent. The percentage dropped to 51%. They were now at a complete disadvantage. Doubt crept into his thoughts. Had he made a mistake by choosing this path? Should he have listened to Hiragiri and apologized instead of launching an attack? Maybe if he had handed over the potion and shown remorse, they would have spared him. But as the thought crossed his mind, Kamiyanagawa issued another order to his bodyguard: end it now. The bodyguard nodded and walked toward Toshiki again. His tone shifted, slightly more composed. He addressed Toshiki by name and acknowledged his talent. There was still a chance, he said. If Toshiki admitted his mistake, he would personally speak to the boss on his behalf. Toshiki stayed quiet for a moment, his breath steadying. He reflected on everything he had endured. Since the day he met that man, life had turned into a never-ending battle. Each day had been a gamble between life and death. But something had changed. The world had shifted, and he had changed with it. A slow smirk formed on Toshiki's face as he reached into his pocket and pulled out the potion. His grip was firm, his voice steady. He thanked them for their concern, but made it clear he was done living a life scraping by, mugging kids for pocket change. That version of him was gone. Now the roles had reversed. He told them to bow their heads. If they did, he'd accept them as his subordinates. He'd look after them himself. But the bodyguard clenched his fist, his eyes narrowing. He stepped forward and declared his final intent. If Toshiki wouldn't submit, then he would have to die. Toshiki pulled out the potion from his pocket, staring at it with a mix of hesitation and resolve. The first dose had already made a difference. With just one potion, a massive gap in strength between him and Kanyanagawa's bodyguard had narrowed significantly. The thought crept in: if he drank one more, maybe he could actually win. The possibility of turning the battle in his favor tempted him. His grip tightened. But before he could move, the bodyguard's punch, aimed straight at him, was suddenly stopped midair. A firm hand blocked the strike. The attacker was stunned. Standing between them now was Ichiju. Ikiju turned toward Toshiki, apologizing for his late arrival. The bodyguard stared at him in disbelief. He recognized the face immediately. It was him. But the power radiating from Ichiju was unexpected. His arm didn't budge at all. No matter how much strength he used, it was completely ineffective. Before the bodyguard could react further, Ichiju struck back with a powerful hit. The man was launched across the room, crashing to the ground with force. Ichiju then turned to Toshiki, warning him not to drink another potion. If he consumed two, the side effects would be fatal. His body wouldn't survive. Toshiki hesitated, lowering the bottle slightly. He admitted that he had thought about it, just for a moment. If he drank the second dose, he might stand a real chance at victory. But then a new thought hit him. How did Ichiju know he was about to drink another one? The realization came crashing down. From the very beginning, everything had gone according to Ichiju's plan. Toshiki's eyes widened. He had been tested. From the start, he wasn't chosen for his strength or loyalty. He was just a pawn, randomly selected to see if he'd betray them and hand over the potion to Kanyanagawa. It had been a gamble all along, a silent trial of where his loyalty truly lay. If he had chosen Kanyanagawa's side, he would have certainly died. No doubt about it. But he didn't. He made the right choice. He let out a breath and acknowledged it. He must have been lucky to arrive at the right answer again. There was no pride in it, just the calm acceptance of fate. But this time, he promised to prove his worth through action. He wasn't just going to say he was loyal, he would show it. Ichiju nodded, appreciating his resolve. He told Toshiki that he liked people who thought smart, who learned from their experiences. Then, without hesitation, he offered his support. He asked Toshiki to lead, to give orders like a true big brother. While this exchange unfolded, Kanyanagawa, who had been observing the scene with a growing scowl, turned toward his bodyguard. He demanded to know what was going on. In his eyes, Ichiju looked like nothing more than a kid. There was no reason for the hesitation. The bodyguard admitted he had let his guard down. The boy's appearance had thrown him off. He hadn't expected such power from someone so young. Ichiju's voice rang out sharply, cutting through the room. He shouted Kanyanagawa's name with fury, calling him out directly. His expression was fierce. He swore to kill him right here, right now. The old man had pushed too far. Kanyanagawa's face flushed red with rage. His calm demeanor shattered. Unable to contain his fury, he gave the command of his guards, kill every last one of them. There would be no more negotiations, no more games, only war. As Ichiju stood confidently in the chaos, his sheer strength and composure caught everyone's attention. The bodyguards under Kanyanagawa, who had been overpowering Toshiki's subordinates, paused and exchanged glances. They couldn't hide their surprise as one of them pointed out that the boy might be one of Hatano's men. It looked as if he had sent Koei's flying with just a single blow. Doubts began to rise as they wondered how someone like him could be just a student. Meanwhile, the man attacking Hiragiri jeered, mocking the surprise on everyone's faces. He claimed the fun was only just beginning. But as he got distracted by his own words, Hariguri seized the moment, grabbing his arm and slamming him forcefully to the ground. Elsewhere, the strongest among Kanyanagawa's bodyguards stepped forward, acknowledging that he had never imagined the day would come when he would face off against a high schooler. But Ishiju, calm and fearless, told him this would also be the day he would lose to one. Fueled by rage, the man lunged toward Ishiju, calling him a brat and warning him not to underestimate him. But Ishiju swiftly sidestepped the attack. The bodyguard tried grabbing his face again, but Ishiju leaped to the other side, effortlessly avoiding the strike once more. The bodyguard's anger only grew. He charged again, fists flying, furious that Ishiju seemed to only dodge rather than fight back. Toshiki, watching all of this unfold, was stunned. The man Ishiju was now toying with was someone he himself couldn't defeat, even with the potion's boost. Ichiju's strength was beyond comprehension. Not far away, Kanyanagawa overheard his remaining bodyguards speaking among themselves. They whispered about Hatano, wondering who he truly was. With Ishiju's performance, the rumors about Hatano taking over Ogane's territory suddenly didn't seem so far-fetched. Even Koei's, one of their strongest, was struggling against a mere student. Kanyanagawa snapped at them, furious that they were wasting time talking. He ordered them to stay quiet and just watch. But the bodyguards, too shaken to obey blindly, continued voicing their fears. After 40 long years, they had finally climbed to the top, only to be humiliated by some young upstart. Even if they won now, their reputations were already in ruins. The organization's strongest man couldn't even take down a single kid. Kanyanagawa, burning with frustration, barked a final command at Koei's. He gave him just one more minute to finish the fight. Koei's heard him clearly. Ichichu, however, observed him calmly. Despite everything that had happened, Koei's hadn't shown a single shift in emotion. But Ichichu knew his own limits. At this point, he couldn't even touch his opponent, let alone finish him in a minute. Koei's lashed out with a powerful kick, but Ishiju countered with a swift dodge, lifting his leg and sidestepping the attack with precision. Koei's gritted his teeth. He couldn't move him at all. Not even in a contest of raw strength could he win. Ishiju noticed an opening and struck with full force. His kick landed cleanly, sending Koei's flying across the floor. The impact was brutal. As he collapsed, the watching bodyguards stared in silence. Koei's was no longer moving. He was already dead. Kanyanagawa stood in shock, unable to believe what he had just witnessed. Even Koei's, the organization's strongest fighter, had been defeated. His thoughts raced. Was it truly possible for someone to overpower Koei's? The remaining bodyguards stared in disbelief. They couldn't accept what had just happened. A high school student had taken down Koei's with a single hit. The sheer impossibility of it left them speechless. But Kanyanagawa snapped them out of it, shouting at the top of his lungs. He ordered everyone to attack, promising that whoever killed the brat would be named Koei's successor. Motivated by the promise and their numbers, the bodyguards reassured themselves. He was just a kid, easily killable. With that, they charged together toward Ichiju. At the moment they reached him, the outcome was swift and brutal. One by one, Ichiju slashed their throats with his axe, each kill precise and merciless. None of them stood a chance. Seeing his men fall like flies, Kanyanagawa pulled out his gun and shouted for him to stop. But before he could even aim, Ichiju hurled a knife that struck directly into Kanyanagawa's chest. Blood spilled from his mouth as he collapsed and died on the spot. Even in his final moments, Kanyanagawa couldn't accept the reality. He was dying at the hands of a high school student. The few remaining men who had survived stood frozen, their voices trembling. They struggled to process what they were seeing. Kanyanagawa, the man who ruled this land for decades, had been brought down by a group of low-ranking nobodies. Toshiki watched everything unfold, barely able to believe it himself. Ichiju had done it. Alone, he had brought down Kanyanagawa. Ichiju then called out to Toshiki, signaling that it was his moment to speak. Toshiki stepped forward and shouted to everyone, commanding attention. He had something important to say. His thoughts lingered for a moment. In less than a week, that one boy had dragged down the old fox who had made this territory his fortress for decades. Ishiju had shattered everything Toshiki believed was possible. Facing Kanyanagawa's former bodyguards and subordinates, Toshiki addressed them directly. Kanyanagawa was dead, and now they knew why he had gone to such lengths to eliminate him. He reintroduced himself as Hatano Toshiki, openly admitting that until recently, he had survived by mugging kids. As he finished, a memory flashed in his mind. Shiju had truly kept his promise. With the final words spoken, Toshiki made it clear to all who remained. From now on, he was their boss. At a sprawling construction site, the air was thick with dust and the clamor of heavy machinery. Workers rushed between scaffolds and cement mixers, their movements hurried and tense as the foreman's sharp commands cut through the chaos. He drove them to work faster, his voice laced with urgency, knowing that even the slightest delay could bring severe punishment from Ijuan, the one overseeing the entire project. Every clang of metal and thud of hammers echoed the pressure they were under. The tense rhythm of the site broke abruptly when a group of unfamiliar men emerged from the edge of the grounds. Their deliberate steps drew the foreman's attention, pulling his focus away from the rushing workers. Confusion flickered across his face as he moved toward them, demanding to know which organization they represented. The strangers revealed themselves without hesitation as subordinates of Kan Yanagawa, men known for their recent allegiance to Toshiki. Their presence alone carried an air of menace. One of them stepped forward, his expression cold as he threatened the foreman, warning him to stay silent and not interfere. Another leaned closer, his voice low and deliberate as he requested a private word, the tension in his tone making his intent clear. The foreman refused to falter. His voice carried authority as he ordered that anyone unrelated to the project should leave the site at once, insisting that the construction schedule could not afford any disruption. The intruders only smirked in response, their dismissive expressions radiating confidence. To them, the schedule meant nothing. They made their true purpose known, demanding immediate payment of a territory fee, as if the ongoing work and looming deadlines were irrelevant. The scene shifted seamlessly to Idrin, seated in his office, deeply absorbed in his work when Minagawa approached with urgent steps. The tension in his voice carried the weight of bad news. He reported that chaos had erupted at the financial center construction site earlier that morning. Several men had stormed the grounds demanding territory fees and in the process had beaten every single worker without hesitation. Investigations confirmed the attackers to be none other than Kan Yanagawa's subordinates. Idrin's expression darkened instantly, anger flashing in his eyes as he processed the report. Frustration boiled over as he cursed Kan Yanagawa's audacity, questioning if the man had lost his senses. The payments were already being handled properly, leaving no reason for such violence. Determined to confront the issue, he demanded that Minagawa contact Kan Yanagawa immediately and demand an explanation. Minagawa's reply only deepened the tension. He explained that every attempt to reach them since morning had failed or lines of communication deliberately cut off. Edwin clicked his tongue sharply, his irritation clear as he muttered about Kan Yanagawa being a cunning old fox. Despite the insult, he issued a direct order to pay the demanded amount regardless, declaring that the construction schedule remained the highest priority, above any grudges or posturing. Minagawa hesitated, his tone cautious as he revealed a troubling detail. The attackers were asking specifically for Idrin, indicating that the matter had little to do with money and far more to do with targeting him directly. Resolute and unwilling to show weakness, Idrin stood and decided they would head to the site immediately. Minagawa, sensing the danger, suggested calling on the president for assistance. The idea was dismissed outright. Edwin's voice carried firm resolve as he stated that relying on others for problems of this scale would forever keep them beneath their rivals. To surpass those above them, they would face this trouble themselves. Rain poured heavily over the construction site as Idrin and Minagawa arrived, their teams and bodyguards surrounding them for protection. The muddy ground and gray skies only heightened the tension in the air. Waiting for them at the site was the leader of Kan Yanagawa's subordinates. With a mocking tone, he welcomed Idrin, commenting on the large number of men he had brought, remarking on his caution. Idrin cut him off sharply, demanding to know Kan Yanagawa's demands. The subordinate flicked away his cigarette with a smirk, revealing that Kan Yanagawa was no longer their boss. The revelation stirred immediate anger among Idrin's bodyguards, who prepared to attack, but Idrin ordered them to stand down and remain calm. The subordinate then gestured to introduce their new leader as Hatano Toshiki stepped forward from the shadows. Recognition struck Idrin immediately. He identified Toshiki as the man who had been present at Ogain's casino, realizing that this same man had seized Kan Yanagawa's position in just a few days. It confirmed Idrin's suspicions about the mysterious kid allied with him. Still, with the construction deadline approaching, Idrin had no time to waste dealing with Toshiki. Focused, Idrin asked why they had come if the issue was not about money. Toshiki, wearing a faint smirk, stated plainly that he was after the gold Idrin possessed. Shock crossed Idrin's face as he realized Toshiki was the one responsible for collecting large amounts of gold. Toshiki confirmed it, admitting that what he had gathered so far was still not enough. Idrin demanded to know what Toshiki planned to do with all the gold, but Toshiki brushed it off, calling it a mere hobby. He shifted the conversation to Idrin's priorities, pointing out that the construction schedule and the success of this project were far more critical for proving his abilities. Toshiki implied that if he were in Idrin's position, he would pay quickly and prioritize the project. Acknowledging Toshiki's insight, Idrin noted how much research Toshiki had done. Toshiki confirmed it, emphasizing that none of this was a game. Idrin then remarked that Toshiki must already know how much gold he held and moved to discuss the price. Toshiki immediately rejected the idea, telling him plainly to hand over the gold without negotiation. Disbelief and anger surfaced in Idrin. Even while offering concessions, he saw Toshiki's actions as insolent, questioning how someone like him could dare interfere. He ordered him to leave, dismissing him as trash. Toshiki countered coldly, pointing out that Idrin was not the only one aware of the future value of the land. Though Toshiki admitted they could not directly harm Idrin, he explained that delaying the construction would be effortless for them. If the project missed its deadline, the financial losses would be enormous. Idrin's mind raced as he processed Toshiki's knowledge. The regional development plan was confidential, known only to a select group of insiders. The fact that Toshiki knew about it left Idrin stunned, questioning who this man truly was. Tashiki, sensing the impact, mocked him for being speechless after hitting a nerve. Ijun muttered that Tashiki's underhanded methods were filthy, truly befitting society's trash. Offended, Tashiki demanded clarity, prompting Ijun to turn to his subordinates. He called Toshiki a savage who relied solely on violence, accusing him of acting superior by pretending to negotiate. With his patience exhausted, Ijun ordered his men to kill them all. The two groups clashed instantly, chaos erupting across the rain-soaked site. Minagawa lunged toward Toshiki, attempting to land a punch, but Ichiju intervened, catching Minagawa's strike effortlessly and gripping his throat. Minagawa, straining against the grip, warned Ichiju of who he was, only to realize the man's incredible strength as he struggled. Elsewhere, Tashiki seized Ijuin by the tie, pulling him close. He admitted to being a savage, but declared that he had climbed to his current position by risking his life. He accused Ijuin of living off privilege, a man born into a wealthy family who flaunted his father's authority to act superior. Meanwhile, Minagawa attempted to strike Ichiju again, but Ichiju caught his arm, countering with a powerful punch that sent Minagawa reeling. Minagawa tried to lift Ichiju and throw him down, but Ichiju overpowered him, climbing onto him and smashing him into the ground with brutal force. Onlookers watched in shock, murmuring in disbelief that Minagawa had been defeated. Ijuin, witnessing the scene unfold, stood frozen in stunned silence, his eyes wide as he realized the overwhelming strength of the enemies before him. Minagawa lay unconscious on the ground while Ijun shouted at him to get up, realizing quickly that it was pointless. Minagawa was completely unresponsive. Ijun's thoughts turned bitter. Minagawa, skilled in every form of martial arts, had been defeated with ease. To Ijun, he was nothing but a useless fool now. Ikiju shifted his gaze toward Ijun, his tone cold. Minagawa was gone, so Ijun had to decide what he would do next. Ijun felt the situation pressing down on him, fully aware that the odds had turned against them. Ichiju's piercing glare cut through him as if reading his every thought, pointing out his plan to abandon his comrades and run. The realization struck Ijun hard. He could hardly comprehend how Ichiju could see so clearly into his intentions. The boy was irritating beyond reason, his very presence grating. Panicked, Ijun tried to negotiate. He offered anything Ichiju wanted, assuming Hateno was only interested in money. If Ichiju would agree to their terms, he would ensure the Ijun family prepared it all. Tashiki demanded clarification, and Ijun revealed his condition. He wanted Ichiju handed over to him, the boy who had been nothing but a thorn in his side since the casino incident. Ijun added that if Tashiki himself had any requests, the Ijun family could meet them without hesitation. His thoughts, however, carried a different intent. If he could turn these two against each other, Hateno would be easier to deal with later. There was no way anyone could resist such an appealing offer. Ichiju's expression darkened. The arrogance in Ijun's words, assuming his wealth could bend others at will, only fueled his disgust. Even hearing his voice made him feel sick. Ijun's composure broke as fear overtook him. He stammered, demanding to know what Ichiju intended to do, and shouted for Hatano to stop him before it was too late. The scene shifted. Ichiju and Tashiki were driving back home in a car. Tashiki glanced at him, asking if it was wise to leave Ijun in that state. The view cut briefly to Ijun, shown battered and broken from the brutal beating Ichiju had delivered. The focus returned to Ichiju as he spoke calmly. Ijun wouldn't die. Killing him outright would be too easy. Ichiju intended to make him suffer slowly, piece by piece. A red traffic signal brought their car to a halt. Tashiki turned to Ichiju, questioning whether Ijun would truly hand over the money quietly. Ichiju was certain he would. The project mattered more to Ijun than anything else. Toshiki acknowledged Ichiju's understanding of him. Ichiju then shifted the conversation, asking about the matter he had brought up earlier. Tashiki explained that if he was referring to the warehouse, he had already found a large one in the countryside, just as instructed. He was sending the location information now. Handing over a card, Tashiki told Ichiju it contained the organization's funds. He insisted Ichiju should be the one to hold on to them. Ichiju examined the card Toshiki had given him, asking how much it held. Tashiki explained that the organization's total assets amounted to around $100 million, but only $10 million had been transferred to this card. The remaining funds would take more effort to liquidate. Ichiju's thoughts turned immediately to preparation. It was time to start stockpiling supplies with the beginner equipment he had. His inventory was still stuck at level 3 and needed expansion. With the crystal stones he had already collected, he could raise it to level 10. Beyond that, money and intermediate crystal stones would be essential. The level 3 inventory, no larger than a carry bag, couldn't store the money he was gathering. Raising it to level 10 all at once was necessary. Level 10 would give him an area of 7 cubic meters, about the size of a phone booth, large enough to store a reasonable amount of resources. He considered whether he should search the surrounding area for active zones to gather more materials. Raking his thoughts, Ichiju instructed Toshiki to stop the car. Tashiki asked where he was heading and whether he needed help. Ichiju declined, saying he would only wander briefly and didn't require assistance. Tashiki inquired about the organization's men, to which Ichiju told him to act as he saw fit based on the situation. Recovering Ijun's gold was the top priority. It had to be secured in physical form and stored in the warehouse. Toshiki confirmed and asked if he should wait. Ichiju told him he would make contact if needed. Toshiki dropped him off and drove away. Ichiju scanned the area and spotted Natsume. Nearby stood Kurozono from forensics. The sight annoyed him. It appeared the two had arranged a meeting. Doubt began to form in his mind as he observed them. The scene shifted to a hospital VIP room where Ajuin and Minagawa had been admitted. Ajuin, now awake, cursed the humiliation he had suffered, calling it the first time he had felt such shame. One of his subordinates informed him that their plan had been exposed by Hatano, the same man from the casino, who was now using it to pressure them into handing over money. Minagawa spoke up, noting that the real problem was the student. His movements were far from ordinary. Another strange detail was that the boy seemed to know them well. He had even called Minagawa by name. Isizaki dismissed the concern, saying it wasn't unusual for people in her position to be recognized by name and suggested Minagawa was overthinking. Minagawa questioned him, but Ajuin agreed with his subordinate's concern. From the first meeting, that student had been openly hostile toward him. More importantly, he knew details about their project that outsiders shouldn't know. Ajuin's tone hardened. The ones who had taken over Kan Yanagawa's forces were indeed troublesome. To avoid delaying their construction schedule, they would hand over the money for now, but there was no reason to panic. The handover would only be temporary. Eventually, they would reclaim everything. Ajuin vowed to take back their money and their lives, leaving nothing behind. The scene shifted to Natsume and Kurozono, seated across from each other in a quiet cafe. Natsume slid a folder across the table, handing over the materials he had requested. She thanked him for going through the trouble to acquire them. Kurozono smirked, his tone cold. He reminded her he never said he would do it for free. Her absence without notice for a week had burdened him with extra work, and the strain had been significant. Natsume lowered her gaze and apologized for the inconvenience, explaining that there had been circumstances. She informed him she would be resigning. As long as she could recover her research materials, her remaining salary could be used for that purpose. It was all she wanted. Kurozono dismissed the notion of money entirely. Her beauty, not her payment, interested him. He told her to remain by his side and do as he said. Only then would he return her materials. Natsume froze, her expression one of disbelief. Kurozono leaned closer, calling it a favorable deal. Staying with him would also secure her position as a forensic scientist. Her voice hardened as she rejected the proposal outright, demanding that he watch his words. She wanted only the return of her materials and would not agree to such methods. Kurozono's expression turned sharp. If she would not comply, she could simply give up. Natsume's hands tightened around the folder. These were her materials. She reminded him that he had no right to confiscate them without cause. Kurozono admitted she was correct, but questioned how she planned to prove ownership. His work involved handling personal information. If he classified the documents as confidential, she would lose access to them completely. There was no way she could win against him. Frustration filled her voice as she demanded to know why he was harassing her like this. Kurozono's response was blunt. It would be troublesome if others learned he could manage a single intern. Did she truly think he had been drawn to her talent and brought her on as an assistant for that reason? He told her to quietly obey, reminding her not to waste her mother's efforts. Natsume's anger exploded. She hurled her tea into his face, shouting at him never to mention her mother again. He called her insolent, even though he had been making concessions. His hand swung toward her, ready to strike. Before the blow could land, Ichiju appeared, seizing Kurozono's wrist in a firm grip. Natsume turned to Ichiju, shocked, asking why he was there. Ichiju's expression was calm and resolute. He told her he understood the situation and instructed her to leave the rest to him. Kurozono froze as Ichiju's hand clamped tightly around his wrist, his expression tightening with shock at the raw strength radiating from a mere high school student. For a brief moment, disbelief flickered in his eyes as the reality set in. This boy was no ordinary delinquent or bystander. It suddenly became clear to him that this was the very person responsible for Natsume's abrupt resignation. The thought irritated him even more, but before he could comment further, Natsume's sharp voice cut through, her anger rising as she told him to stop making such vulgar, insinuating remarks. Ichiju wasted no time indulging Kurozono's provocations. His tone was level yet commanding as he ended their exchange, making it clear he was taking Natsume with him. Without hesitation, he demanded to know the price Kurozono placed on the research materials she had come to reclaim. Kurozono's smirk widened at this, his demeanor dripping with condescension as he mocked Ichiju. He called him a foolish hero, a greenhorn playing at bravery without understanding the cost, and declared his demand without hesitation, 10 million yen. The sum left Natsume stunned, her breath catching in disbelief. Around the cafe, the quiet murmurs of curious onlookers quickly swelled into hushed conversations. 10 million yen for a single high school student sounded absurd to them. Some of the bystanders joked under their breath, remarking that they too would gladly accept such an offer if someone paid them that much to end a relationship. Others, more skeptical, dismissed the boy entirely, certain he was bluffing and lacked the means to back up such a transaction. Kurozono, savoring the tension, pressed harder, urging Ichiju to leave if he could meet the demand. Meddling in matters far beyond his reach would only waste everyone's time. He leaned back with a smug confidence, fully convinced that Ichiju would back down, humiliated. Yet Shiju remained unmoved. His voice was calm and deliberate as he requested the account number for the transfer. Kurozono chuckled darkly, his arrogance swelling as he assumed this was nothing but an empty bluff. He told Ichiju to go ahead and try, promising that if he actually managed to pay, he would go so far as to kneel before him. Natsu tugged lightly on Ichiju's sleeve, urging him to leave before the situation escalated further, but the whispers around them continued to grow louder. Several patrons exchanged knowing looks and murmured that young people these days were far too competitive, driven by pride and ego. A few felt a flicker of pity for Ichiju, assuming he had been drawn into a situation he couldn't possibly resolve, yet most believed he had brought the humiliation upon himself. They watched closely, wondering what he was planning to do next. He told Kurozono that kneeling was unnecessary. All that was required was a proper and public apology to Natsume, acknowledging her with the respect she deserved. The crowd's murmurs rose again, now tinged with awe. 1 billion yen for cleaning alone was an outrageous gesture, one that suggested Ichiju was far from ordinary. Some whispered that he must be from a wealthy or powerful background, their perception of him shifting entirely. Kurozono's thoughts churned with frustration and confusion. Since when had Natsume gained such powerful backing? And now, in front of all these witnesses, he was being forced to swallow his pride and apologize. The humiliation burned in his chest, but Ichiju's voice snapped him back. The boy reminded him sharply to hurry and make good on his word. Breaking a promise now with so many eyes watching would only destroy him further. Cursing inwardly, Kurozono realized he had been cornered and outplayed. Grinding his teeth, he lowered himself, bowing deeply despite his pride. In a strained tone, he addressed her properly, apologizing formally as Ed Soka-san. Reluctantly, he handed over her research materials, relinquishing any claim he had tried to assert. Not wasting another moment, Ichiju and Natsume left the cafe. As they walked, Ichiju caught sight of her tense expression and asked quietly if something was bothering her. Her frustration erupted immediately. She admitted she couldn't stand how things had unfolded. She demanded to know why he hadn't simply beaten Kurozono down and why he had handed over such a massive sum without hesitation. Those materials had belonged to her from the beginning, and the more she thought about the exchange, the angrier she became. Ichiju acknowledged her feelings, telling her not to worry. Kurozono would not be allowed to use that money freely for long. Natsume's anger subsided slightly, replaced by a quiet apology. She admitted she had gone to meet Kurozono without telling him, her only intent being to recover her research results. Ichiju assured her he had already seen everything. By chance, he had spotted her earlier and decided to follow, and in the end, everything had worked out. He instructed her to bring Mineta and the others with her in the future as backup, especially during unpredictable encounters like this. She agreed but glanced at him curiously, asking why he had been in the area to begin with. Hiju explained that he had been caught in the rain while working earlier and came to the shopping district to buy a change of clothes. Hearing that, Natsume offered to accompany him as an apology for the trouble, and he accepted. The two of them made their way into a nearby shopping mall, heading toward a high-end clothing store. From a short distance away, a girl noticed them and nudged her friend, whispering that the boy was Ichiju, the errand boy from their class. She questioned why someone like him would be in such an expensive store, her gaze drifting to Natsume. The woman beside him was strikingly beautiful, which immediately sparked hushed speculation. Some assumed it must be sugar dating, though others disagreed, noticing that Ichiju was the one paying for everything. They murmured about how costly the clothing there was and decided to follow quietly, curiosity getting the better of them. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Kurozono sat alone, his jaw tight with anger as he replayed the events in his mind. The humiliation of being undermined by an intern and a high school student gnawed at him, a wound to his pride that he could not ignore. Yet, as he mulled over the 11 million yen sitting in his account, he muttered to himself that perhaps it was a small blessing. He reasoned that the brat seemed wealthy enough to be extorted again, and he began plotting how to turn this situation to his advantage. Before his thoughts could fully take shape, the sound of approaching footsteps pulled him from his scheming. Tashiki arrived with several members of his gang, their presence deliberate and menacing. Tashiki confirmed Kurozono's identity, his tone casual but firm. Kurozono, still fuming, told them to leave, claiming he had no patience to deal with anyone in his current mood. Tashiki ignored the warning entirely, his voice steady as he explained why they were there. They hadn't come to talk or negotiate. They were there to teach Kurozono how to put that 11 million yen to proper use, a lesson that would be delivered not with words but with force. It was clear from their approach that a brutal reckoning was about to begin. Back in the shopping mall, Ichiju and Natsume wandered into another section, their steps slowing as they approached the jewelry counters. The glass cases gleamed under the bright lights, lined with delicate accessories that shimmered like drops of light. Natsume caught sight of her reflection in a mirror by the counter, pausing for a moment. She tilted her head slightly, adjusting her hair, then picked up a few pieces of jewelry, testing how they looked against her skin. A faint, confident smile touched her lips as she admired herself. To her, taking care of appearance was second nature. Skincare, makeup, small luxuries, these weren't indulgences, they were essentials. She made it clear, in her calm and steady tone, that she was still a woman and these things were simply a part of her life. The quiet moment was broken by the buzz of Ichiju's phone. The screen lit up with Hanado's name, requesting a video call. Ichiju, curious about the unexpected timing, accepted and turned the screen toward Natsume. On the other end, Hanato appeared, his usual calm replaced by a faintly smug expression. The camera panned slightly, revealing a beaten figure slumped behind him. Kurozono, barely recognizable, was a shadow of his usual arrogant self, face swollen and bruised, his pride shattered as thoroughly as his composure. Hanato's words were simple but decisive. Every single yen from the earlier transfer had been recovered, and along with it, all of Kurozono's hidden assets had been seized as recompense. Natsume's lips curved into a subtle, satisfied smile at the sight. Her expression softened only slightly as she acknowledged Hanato's efficiency, quietly noting that he had done well. Before their thoughts could settle, a voice rang out across the polished floor. It was a familiar tone, laced with a faint surprise meant to sound casual. Miki, flanked by her friend, was approaching, her expression painted with innocence as though the tension between them had never existed. Her steps were light, almost calculated, as she closed the distance with practiced ease. She greeted Ichiju as though running into him was nothing more than coincidence, her smile soft and deliberately nonchalant. Ichiju, however, didn't mirror the act. His gaze was sharp, cold, and detached, carrying no trace of warmth as he turned to face her. His voice was even stripped of any unnecessary courtesy as he asked what she wanted. The air between them cooled instantly, the weight of his indifference making Miki's practiced composure falter for just a fraction of a second. Trying to salvage control, she softened her expression further, lowering her gaze slightly to appear vulnerable. Her words were careful, faint with a trace of melancholy as she claimed she didn't understand why things had grown so tense between them. If she had ever offended him, she insisted, she was sorry. She just wanted him to treat her as he had before. Her tone dipped further, weaving in a quiet note of sadness, as though expecting guilt to shift the balance back in her favor. But her attempt didn't land. Ichiju's focus didn't waver, his attention remaining firmly on his conversation with Natsume as though Miki's words carried no weight at all. The dismissive silence pressed against her composure like a vice, and though her smile stayed in place, it twitched slightly, betraying the frustration simmering beneath. Her face felt hot, her calm exterior straining to hold back the anger rising from being ignored so blatantly. Her friend, standing slightly behind, leaned in just enough to whisper that something about Ichiju felt different. The man who once might have bent to these games wasn't reacting, not even slightly. Not even Miki's usual cutesy charm seemed to scratch his surface. Their friend murmured if perhaps he was bluffing, but the thought only hardened Miki's resolve. Determination flickered in her eyes as she closed the distance once more. She reached out, fingers curling around Ichiju's arm, her posture shifting subtly. A calculated lean, a slight tilt of her shoulder, her body positioned to draw his eyes whether he wanted to or not. Her voice, now smoother and more coaxing, broke the heavy air as she asked what he was looking to buy, casually offering to help him choose. The confidence behind her movements was clear. This old tactic had never failed to crack someone's composure before. But Ichiju's reaction came without hesitation. His hand moved, brushing hers aside with a quiet, deliberate motion that carried more weight than Rei's words ever could. His voice, when it came, was sharp and steady, cutting through the noise like cold steel. He told her to stop the act, his tone laced with a faint edge of disdain. The word disgusting leaving his lips with finality. A single word froze her in place. For a moment, it didn't feel real, the sound of it echoing in her mind as she repeated it inwardly, unable to accept that it had been aimed at her. Disbelief twisted her expression, only for it to quickly snap into something sharper, angrier. Her voice, no longer coded in honey, lashed out as she spat back that he should be grateful for her attention at all. She accused him of arrogance, stating that someone from the bottom like him had no right to carry himself this way. Her eyes flicked to Natsume, her words shifting into a pointed sneer. She painted Ichiju as dirt poor, insinuating that he had likely burned through every yen he had at the previous store. With a sly smile, she suggested that someone as striking as Natsume would be better off leaving him before he dragged her down with him. Her satisfaction grew as she let the jab hang in the air, her grin widening just slightly as thoughts of his past crossed her mind. If he made her angry enough, she considered he could expose everything. And the thought alone felt like holding a blade to his throat, even if only in her imagination. The tension in the store was starting to draw attention. Workers and cashiers exchanged uneasy glances, their murmurs low but sharp. The manager, clearly fed up with the growing scene, turned to a junior staff member and ordered her to handle it. The new hire let out a faint groan, muttering under her breath about why this had to be her problem. Her senior, unmoved, simply reminded her that it was her first day, claiming this was the perfect chance to make a good impression. She rolled her eyes, knowing it was less about impressions and more about being thrown into a headache. Still, she forced a practiced customer service smile onto her face and approached the group. Her tone was polite as she requested that they lower their voices, pointing out that their argument was disturbing others. Miki didn't stop. Her voice sharpened as she turned her attention back to Ichiju, continuing her verbal assault without a pause. She told him people like him didn't belong in a place like this, that this was no space for broke strays pretending to fit in. She ordered him to drop whatever he was holding and leave before embarrassing himself any further. Ichiju didn't react. Not a single word left his mouth as he set the product back onto the shelf, exactly as she demanded. his expression unreadable. The junior staffer frowned slightly, assuming the two were just another pair of window shoppers wasting everyone's time. She allowed a silent sigh, already preparing to move on, until Ichiju reached into his pocket. A sleek card slid from his hand into hers, his movement steady and deliberate. His voice was calm as he gave his instruction. Tally up everything. Not just what he was holding, but every single product in the store, even the stock in the back room. He was buying all of it, paying by card. For a second, the room went quiet. Mickey and her friend froze in place, their faces blank, their mouths parting as if their minds couldn't process what they had just heard. The junior staffer, wide-eyed and tense, looked at Ichiju like she had misheard, asking if he was serious. His response came in a simple, silent nod. The staffer's fingers curled tightly around the card, holding it against her chest as though it were a lifeline. A rush of mirrors and adrenaline surged through her as she quickly excused herself, hurrying off toward the manager while telling Ichiju to wait. As the staff scrambled, Natsume turned to Ichiju, her expression calm but questioning. She asked if this wasn't going too far, even as a response to provocation. Ichiju's gaze didn't shift as he explained, his tone level. This had nothing to do with revenge. In his eyes, money was only going to lose its worth soon enough. Better to convert it all into something tangible while it still carried value. Before the words could settle, Mickey's voice cut in again, rising sharply. Her composure cracked as she demanded to know if he had lost his mind. Was he really going through with all of this just because his pride had been hurt? Her outrage hung in the air, sharp and desperate. Ichiju turned his head slightly, his eyes cold, and dismissed her with a few flat words. This wasn't her concern. She had no place in the conversation. Her friend, now visibly uneasy, stepped closer and whispered urgently to Mickey. From the way this was unfolding, this didn't seem like a bluff. The boy in front of them wasn't just posturing, he might actually be some wealthy heir. She urged Mickey to back down, to swallow her pride and apologize before she took the fall with him. But Mickey scoffed. The disbelief in her eyes only hardened. She wasn't willing to retreat yet. She wanted proof, and until she saw it, she wasn't going anywhere. Meanwhile, the junior staffer reached for Superior and relayed the situation. The manager nearly choked at the request, his expression shifting from disbelief to alarm. A student, someone who barely looked like he could buy a handful of the smaller items, wanted to purchase the entire store, every product including the back stock. As if the day wasn't complicated enough, another customer had just tried to purchase something only to be told the item was already sold. The superior had to step in, apologizing and explaining that the entire inventory had been claimed. The staff got to work quickly. The manager moved from shelf to shelf, back to storage, tallying the impossible request, his movements sharp and focused as the junior assistant followed closely, jotting down every number. The minutes dragged, every tick of the clock heavy as the store buzzed with hushed whispers. Nearly 20 minutes later, the junior staffer finally returned, bowing her head as she handed Ichiju the finalized receipt. The list covered everything. Cosmetics, ice cream, the backroom inventory, every last item. The total number reached 30,230 products. After applying a 20% manager's discount, the grand total came to 120 million yen. The number dropped into the air like a weight. Mickey and her friend both reacted instantly, their shock spilling into open screams, their voices cutting through the hushed murmurs of the store. But the total was real. Every digit stood on that receipt like an immovable fact. Ichiju didn't flinch. He signed without hesitation, his movements precise and calm. He handed over an address, instructing the staff to arrange delivery for all of it. The staff, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief, nodded quickly and confirmed the delivery would be handled within 3 days. Mickey's mask finally cracked. Her friend, pale with panic, stepped forward, grabbing Mickey's arm as she turned to Ichiju, begging him for forgiveness. She claimed Mickey had only gotten carried away, and none of it had been meant with real malice. Mickey tried to recover, forcing a sweet, polished smile onto her face. A smile so artificial it couldn't have fooled anyone. Her tone dripped with false sincerity as she apologized, saying she had only spoken so harshly because she was interested in him because she'd lost control. Ichiju didn't spare her another glance. His words were clipped and final as he stated plainly that he had no interest in her. His attention shifted back to Natsume as he suggested they leave. Mickey stood frozen in the middle of the store, humiliated, her face pale as her hands curled tightly at her sides. No one said a word as Ichiju and Natsume walked toward the exit. The staff lined up by the entrance, bowing deeply, their voices unified as they thanked him and expressed hope for his next visit, if there was ever a next time. Later, the two walked down the quiet streets outside, the neon lights reflecting faintly off the wet pavement. Natsume broke the silence first, a small smirk on her lips as she admitted that shopping in such an extravagant, unapologetic way had felt strangely satisfying. She asked aloud if she should start stockpiling supplies as well, just in case. Ichiju nodded, his tone calm but heavy. When the world inevitably collapsed, he said, a single loaf of bread could become more valuable than a person's life. Natsume let out a quiet laugh, brushing it off lightly, and suggested they keep shopping. But before she could finish her thought, something shifted. Ichiju's body went rigid. A subtle pulse of energy, invisible to anyone else, rippled through the air around him. His expression hardened as he turned to her. His words were brief and sharp as he told her to head home first. Natsume blinked, confused, her eyes scanning the empty street as she asked what was happening. Ichiju's voice was steady as he replied that their shopping was done. A level 15 special zone had just spawned nearby, and only he could see it. To Natsume, the world seemed unchanged. But to Ishiju, time blurred, minutes and hours losing meaning. His body was already moving, his blade cutting through swarms of zombies like a storm tearing through dry leaves. Each strike was clean, deliberate, his movements carrying a precision born from countless battles as he pushed forward without pause, carving a path straight toward the heart of the zone until the door to the designated safe house finally came into view. Level 15 zones no longer posed any challenge for Ichiju. His movements were sharp, precise, and efficient, cutting through waves of enemies without breaking a sweat. When the system confirmed the zone had been cleared, he stepped into the safe zone. The moment his boots touched the marked ground, his phone buzzed. It was Tashiki. His voice was steady but carried weight as he reported that the gold shipment had finally arrived. A full ton. Tashiki asked what he should do with it. Ichiju didn't hesitate. He told him to secure it in the warehouse for now. He would send over a detailed shopping list soon. Before Toshiki could respond, Ichiju ended the call without another word and immediately sent a message with the exact locations and quantities of supplies to purchase. When Toshiki opened the list, his hands nearly went slack. His phone almost slipped from his grip. This wasn't a simple supply order. This was large enough to make it look like Ichiju planned to buy out the entire city. But Ichiju had no time to explain. The golden supply issue was settled. Now his focus shifted back to farming crystals. As he walked down the quiet street, his head tilted slightly. A sharp surge of energy pulsed across the horizon. His eyes narrowed. Another zone. He stood there for a brief moment, silent, recognizing the pattern. Zones were starting to appear far more frequently now. It wasn't random anymore. Maybe those whispers weren't just rumors after all. Maybe the apocalypse truly was beginning to breathe down the world's neck. He didn't waste a second on doubt. Without hesitation, he threw himself back into the grind. Zone after zone, day after day, he cleared, collected, and hunted as if he were racing against a clock no one else could hear. Nearly a month passed this way, and then suddenly there was no more time. The countdown had nearly reached 0. Only one day remained. Inside the lab, Natsume looked up from her experiment, her hands pausing mid-motion. Her voice was quiet but carried a trace of concern as she asked Mineta if he had seen Ichiju recently. Mineta shook his head. Nearly half a month had gone by without a single word from him. Not even Toshiki had been around lately. Natsume's brow furrowed, her expression darkening. She hadn't seen Ichiju once since that shopping trip. If what he had said before was true, then tonight was it. Doomsday. Where the hell is he gone? And then, as if on cue, Ichiju finally appeared. He walked into the lab like nothing had happened, his expression calm and casual as though weeks hadn't passed. His voice was steady as he told them it had been a while. Natsume and Mineta froze. For a moment, neither knew how to react. It really had been that long. Ichiju didn't waste time. He simply told them they were heading out and to get ready. Not long after, the car moved quietly along a deserted road, carrying them to an unknown destination. The drive was silent, the tension heavy but unspoken. Eventually, the vehicle rolled to a stop before a massive compound. Tashiki was already there, waiting near the entrance. As they stepped out, Mineta's brows furrowed. Confusion laced his voice as he asked Toshiki why he was there so early, though Tashiki didn't give a direct answer. Instead, his gaze shifted to Ichiju. He explained that he had traveled through multiple cities and secured everything on the list. He gestured for them to follow, telling them to see it with their own eyes. The moment the warehouse door creaked open, both Natsume and Mineta froze where they stood. Their eyes widened as they took in the sight before them. It looked as though someone had ransacked the inventory of an entire country. Floor to ceiling, every inch was packed with supplies, mountains of food, stacks of bottled water, barrels of fuel, crates of medicine, rows of generators, and more. They turned to Ichiju, stunned, demanding to know what all this was supposed to be. Toshiki tapped on a nearby laptop, scrolling through numbers and figures, and calmly confirmed that the quantities matched the list. Everything was here. But Ichiju didn't simply nod. He asked again, his tone sharp, wanting confirmation. Toshiki met his gaze and clarified. This wasn't all of it. This was just the first half. The rest was secured in another warehouse next door. To make this happen, he had practically stripped 4 of the biggest supermarket chains bare. Natsume and Mineta stood in silence, unable to believe what they were seeing. This wasn't preparation. This was something far beyond it. It felt like the kind of stockpile someone would build only if they expected the end of the world. Then Toshiki voiced the obvious concern. Even with all these supplies, how could they possibly store and preserve it all? Ichiju didn't answer him directly. Instead, he asked where the gold was kept. Once Toshiki pointed it out, Ichiju told Natsume and Mineta to follow. There was something they needed to see. For the past several days, Ichiju had been grinding relentlessly, conquering zone after zone, climbing from level to level until he reached 50. In the process, he had collected more than enough crystal stones to push his inventory space to the next stage, level 40. Now it was time to use them. He approached the stash of gold, exactly 1 ton stacked neatly in front of him. Without hesitation, he extended his hand as the crystals activated. A radiant glow spread across the gold. Natsu and Mineta watched as the entire pile slowly dissolved, shimmering and vanishing into nothing. Mineta's jaw dropped. His shock spilled into words as he demanded to know what was happening. Was the gold evaporating into thin air? But Shiju didn't pause. He continued consuming crystal after crystal like fuel. A surge of power erupted outward, an energy field flaring around him. A deep, almost otherworldly voice resonated through the air, announcing completion. Gold consumption finished. Inventory expanded. Current level 40. Capacity 350 cubic meters. Enough to hold the space of 2 full basketball courts. The glowing field surrounding Ichiju became visible to the others, no longer abstract but a tangible space. Toshiki blinked in disbelief while Mineta stammered, torn between wondering if what he saw was science or pure magic. Ichiju didn't bother with explanations. He told them to keep watching. Reaching for a nearby cardboard box, he lifted it effortlessly and placed it into the glowing field. It vanished instantly, as if reality itself had swallowed it whole. Mineta flinched, his voice rising in disbelief as he shouted, demanding to know what kind of madness this was. But Ishiju stayed focused. He told them plainly there was no more time to waste. Whether they believed him or not was irrelevant. The apocalypse would strike tonight. At midnight, the first waves would begin. Special zones would appear. Zombies would rise from the shadows. Society would fracture, and survival would no longer be about comfort or privilege, but about raw determination, preparation, and strategy. Ichiju explained what they were seeing now was his personal inventory space. Once the end began, each of them would gain the ability to unlock their own. But its usefulness, its size, its level would depend on them. And gold. Gold was the foundation. One of the rarest resources needed to upgrade that space. That was why he had been hunting for it without pause over the past weeks. He told them the clock was ticking. Barely half a day remained before everything unraveled. They had only until then to prepare. Mineta stood frozen, his mind reeling. He muttered that this couldn't be real, that the world couldn't simply end overnight. But Toshiki didn't argue. He had spent enough time with Ichiju to know his warnings, no matter how insane they sounded or rarely wrong. He simply placed a firm hand on Mineta's shoulder, telling him to stay calm and just listen. Ichiju repeated his words once more. Whether they believed him or not was their choice. But he wasn't about to let those who stood with him fall without a chance. That was why he was handing over supplies enough to survive the first waves of chaos. He told them to take what was theirs and make use of it. Toshiki lowered his head slightly, fist clenched at his side, then nodded. He said he understood. Before long, Toshiki and Mineta had loaded their share of supplies into a massive truck. The heavy container doors shut with final clang. Toshiki told Ichiju they were ready to go. Ichiju nodded, instructing them to return quickly and finish their own preparations. But before leaving, Toshiki turned back to him one last time. Their relationship had always been distant, but Toshiki admitted that this time he believed in Ichiju. He was grateful, not just for the warning, but for trusting them enough to share it. And if Ichiju ever needed anything, even when the world itself collapsed, he could call. Ichiju gave a faint smile and told him to survive well. The truck rolled away. Once they were gone, Ichiju turned to Natsume, telling her there were still things they had to do inside. But Natsume didn't follow. She stood there silent and unmoving, her eyes locked on him. She had something to say. Her voice was quiet but heavy as she finally asked, why? Why had he kept the truth about his inventory powers from her? Did he not trust her? Well, before she could continue, Ichiju cut in. He already knew her next question. She wanted to know why he pushed Toshiki and Mineta, the very people who had supported him from the beginning, away. She nodded. Her next words carried weight as she said that with all these supplies, wouldn't it make more sense for them all to stick together once the apocalypse began? Ichiju shook his head. Not even close. In a collapsing world, he told her, humans could be far more dangerous than any zombie. He had seen it himself. The end would turn everything into a brutal contest of survival. And when people, especially those new to desperation, gained access to too many resources, it never ended well. He wanted her to understand something clearly. People weren't born selfish, but fear, desperation, and opportunity would twist even the kindest soul. He asked her to think about the kind of world the other survivors would be coming from, and how she planned to endure the cruelty ahead. How she would survive when things grew 10 times worse than they were now. If she couldn't find her own resolve, then this was where their paths would split. Natsume didn't answer. She simply turned and walked away, her steps firm and deliberate. Ichiju watched her go and called out, asking if she couldn't even hesitate before walking away. But she didn't keep going. She stopped, glanced back, and told him not to underestimate her. She had resolved to, and there was no time to waste. She still had things to do. Minutes later, outside the warehouse, Ichiju stood waiting alone. The sky above was dark and heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. Natsume returned. She walked up beside him without a word. He looked at her, his voice quiet but firm as he said it seemed like she had made her choice. She nodded. This was her own way of showing resolve. Ichiju tilted his head back, gazing toward the sky. He told her they had 1 minute left. 1 minute to say goodbye to this world, to the air they breathed. Because after this, nothing would ever smell fresh again. Only blood and smoke would fill their lungs. Elsewhere, across the city, others clung to their last fragments of normal life. The air was heavy, every breath laced with tension. People tried to smile, drink, and distract themselves, but the weight of the unknown loomed. Even Toshiki, now back in his place, sipped quietly on a cold beer. Whether it would be his last drink, no one could say. Natsume's posture was stiff, her fear thinly veiled beneath a calm mask. But Ishiju, he stood still, calm, unshaken. He had lived through this once already. He knew it was coming. And then with the sound that cut through the night, the countdown struck one. The system's voice rang out cold and final. Apocalypse has arrived.